What's good, folks? Family, friends, loved ones, enemies, frenemies, wizards, witches, muggles, mudbloods, people of Middle-earth to another episode of Disguise Coverage, the only podcast that gives you an equal amount of blueberries in each muffin, and that is presented by the best pizza in Buffalo, New York, and that is One Pie Pizza. Find the online menu in the episode show notes, whether here on YouTube or whichever podcasting app or platform you are listening to this show on. I'm your host, Anthony Prohaska. Find me on Twitter at pro__ant. That's pro, 2 ANT. In tonight's episode of Disguise Coverage, we've been bringing things full circle these past couple of weeks. Last week, we had on Mr. Bruce Nolan to go through the grades for the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft class, really evaluating the players in terms of who they are in a vacuum, but also grading and evaluating their fit within the team and some long-term projection and things like that. He was on earlier in this offseason talking about what the Bills needed to do going into the draft. And my guest tonight also is kind of in that mold in terms of bringing things full circle. I did an episode several weeks ago, or maybe a month ago, I don't know, everything blends together at this point, where I had this guest on and we talked about looking at the Buffalo Bills draft needs and their potential draft class through the eyes of an enemy. What do opponents not want the Bills to get? Who do opponents not want them to get? What do they not want them to address? So on and so forth. And now that the draft has happened, I thought it would be fun to invite that guest back to kind of put a nice little bow on this 2024 draft class, but also the Bills roster as a whole, and kind of give an outlook in terms of who they are and what they are through the enemy's eyes and from an enemy's perspective. And with that being said, I welcome to the stage Mr. Taylor Kyles, Patriots beat reporter and a person who I enjoy kind of talking ball with and hanging out with. Taylor, thank you for taking the time. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, buddy. Good to be back. Every time you do the intro, I smile. It is the absolute best in the business, but good to be back, buddy. It's been too long. What was it, like 2 entire weeks?
I think that's what, you know, what's funny is I was going to do like a longer like intro for you of like, oh, he does this. And I kind of want to be like, he was just here like 3 weeks ago. So everybody should already know who he is. It's funny you mentioned the intro, like I get a lot of positive comments on it, but there's some people that hate it. Like, oh, I turned in to watch football and you're talking about like witches and muggles. I don't even know what that is. Like, this show sucks. And I'm like, all right, I don't know why you're so angry. And then other people that are like, I only watch the show for the intro. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but also kind of hurtful because like that's not the main part, but whatever. Like it's funny how I get it from both ends. Most people like it, but I'll get YouTube comments at times, or like people on Reddit will be like, what's with that intro? I thought this was football. And then I try to like troll them and go harder. I'm like, oh, you don't know what a muggle is? Do you not know what like how important they are to like a cover 2 defense? But that's just me. How's it going?
Clearly that part of your audience is not going to like this episode because I am surrounded by comic book, superhero movie memorabilia, and I could not be happier. So I get the same comments where sometimes people are just like, what the hell? That's not football stuff in the back. I'm like, I got a Tom Brady. So please leave me alone. Although it's probably
You're right. I have one Tom Brady Funko Pop. Yeah. Oh yeah. The roast. I didn't watch it. I saw some clips. I don't even want to get into that niche aspect of it. I do want to ask you one cool question before we dive into it. In terms of looking at this Bills roster, what do you think of, I guess, the kind of like fire to the smoke that multiple people have confirmed of like the Bills not wanting to trade with the Patriots and the Patriots potentially wanting Keon Coleman and maybe wanting to move up there? Bills fans are still up in a tither about like trading with Kansas City and giving Kansas City somebody they wanted. And then that Patriots story came out, and now they're like, oh, so you wouldn't do a deal with the Patriots because they're the Patriots, but you do a deal with Kansas City, even though it's like kind of different. What are your thoughts, though, on that in terms of like the Patriot or the Bills kind of like blocking the Patriots from kind of getting what they wanted in essence?
If this Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs thing works out the way we think it's going to, the Bills need to freaking stop trading with the Chiefs. It's ridiculous at this point. Just like learn your lesson. Doesn't matter if it's irrational. Just like give yourself a
never
break.
Again. Yeah.
Now, so I had Cameron Wolf actually on Pat's Daily, and he was talking about what the trade scenarios were. Now, I do think that Xavier Legette, was my guy. I also will get my bragging rights in. Bro, I kind of nailed some of their picks. I was on Javon Baker. I was on Xavier Legette.
I'm so mad about Baker. I'm so mad.
I know you are. It made me even happier. I saw the Bills guys who were like, no. I saw Eric did the whole video on him. I watched it, and you're like, it's like, yeah, he is a good player. Great job, Eric.
Broke my heart.
That down for the people. But yeah, I don't. It would make sense if Keon Coleman was their guy after Legette, because I think he does give you that rare size that, like, I felt like Leggett and Keon Coleman were kind of rare athletes in terms of, like we talked about, Leggett was the last guy in that past like Brian Thomas tier where he had size and explosiveness, whereas other guys had one or the other. Then Keon, it's like, well, he's not super explosive, but he's more athletic than people give him credit for, and he's huge. So he just gives you that body type that you don't really see very often. Now, I was very happy with the Patriots picks after that. I think like Jalen Polk, you could argue like they have some overlaps in terms of like the positional versatility, where maybe you don't want them at one spot all the time, but they can get involved in the run game. They're well-rounded guys. They're high energy. They catch everything, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I do believe that what it was told to me from Cam Wolf was that the Bills had a handshake agreement with the Patriots, then used that to shop the offer to the Panthers, and were like, hey, we don't want to trade with our division rival. We want to get back into the first round. And then the thing that everybody thought was going to happen, where the Panthers hop back into the first round and get Leggett, happened. Now, honestly, I wasn't even upset because I was saying that was the one team I wanted him to go to. He gets near his family and like the accent and everything. It is so perfect. I did want that Carolina connection with South Carolina Leggett, North Carolina Drake May. It was not meant to be, but yeah, the Keon Coleman part, I'm still a little iffy on, especially because now reports are leaning more towards Leggett. But I do believe that the Bills were basically just using the Patriots to try to find the like structure for another trade and get that done with the Panthers. Also, just a juicy storyline. So I'm going to believe it's proven.
I wrote down the timestamp of when you started talking about this. That's 100% one of the promo things I'm going to use going forward in this episode, because I know it's just, and I get the nature of it. Like I don't want to help Kansas City, and I also really like Xavier Worthy. Worthy was my wide receiver 4. But despite that, I see both sides of it. You don't want to make your opponent stronger, but at the end of the day, you still want to make whatever move you think is best for you to make your team as good as it can be. And so I understand the notion of, no, you still should have just taken Coleman there and don't help out Kansas City, but then you don't have the 3rd round pick, and who knows, maybe Kansas City gets Worthy anyway, and you're not really like necessarily preventing anything. Maybe they trade up to 29. Maybe Worthy is still there at the end of the first. Like there's all these scenarios, but yeah, it's just, I just thought it was so funny to see that, because so many, it was that, right? It wasn't even just that a receiver got taken at 28, because some Bills fans wanted Worthy. I really think it was down to, by the time night 1 rolled around, it was between Brian Thomas, Worthy, and Leggett, some combination of those 3, different percentages. I think if most Bills fans had their choice, it would have been Brian Thomas. Second most is probably Leggett, and then Worthy is closer to Leggett there in the number 3. And so not only did the Bills trade out of night 1 twice, but then 2 receivers went in each of those spots. And the 2 receivers that went were guys that Bills fans really wanted. And then on top of that, one of those teams was the Chiefs. Like if the Chiefs had traded up and took like a linebacker or a safety, like I don't think Bills fans would have cared as much. They still probably would have cared because it's the Chiefs. But if it was some other team who traded up for Worthy, or some other team who traded up for anything else, there were so many ways where it could have just been mitigated. But yeah, that night 1 was just fire and chaos and anger because of trading up with the Chiefs, or letting the Chiefs trade up and get their guy, adding another speed element to the offense. And then so that story and the debate was all like, oh, well, who cares? Like, you just got to make your team better. You can't worry about that. So then to hear the Patriots stuff come out, it just opened that wound, and everybody was just like, well, why would, so you won't do that to the Chiefs, but you'll do that to the Patriots? Like, why? There was just a lot of like stops, like start and go, stutter, like thoughts of, and yeah, I saw, man, yeah, that was a really great episode when you had Cam Wolf on. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh no, because the first thought that went in my brain was everybody's going to juxtapose the 2 and be like, so you didn't want to help the Pats, but you were cool to help the Chiefs? Like, what the hell? And man.
If you're going to help one rival, maybe help the rival that's not so good right now, doesn't have Patrick Mahomes now,
right?
You know.
But then, yeah, I don't know. It's you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, what happens if you trade with the Pats and Drake May is the truth right away, and the Patriots go like 12-5 this year or something like that, and then you're even more so like, oh, look, you helped the Patriots turn it around. Like, look what you did. And also, too, I forgot, or maybe I not forgot this. I didn't know this. I was reading. I forgot the year before the Chiefs. I shouldn't say forget. I didn't forget because I didn't know this. The year before the Chiefs got Patrick Mahomes, they wanted Paxton Lynch in the first round. And and they didn't get him because the Broncos nabbed him like 1 pick before. And then the year after, the Chiefs traded up and got Mahomes. All these little like it's funny, just those little strings and breadcrumbs of things that if you pull one away, like how it can change the future. I think about that all the time with like, especially with the dynasty that resulted for you guys. Like if Tom Brady fumbled that friggin' ball, the tuck rule is not a thing. And if the Pats lose that game, I'm like, oh my God, like how the course of NFL history changes. And the bigger one with that everyone forgets about, Brady got hurt in the AFC Championship game against the Steelers. Drew Bledsoe came in and helped them win that game. Troy Brown also had a punt return touchdown in that game. Fun fact, in case anybody cares. So I always think about all those, let alone the bigger piece of if Mo Lewis doesn't knock Drew Bledsoe out, yada, yada. What if Belichick doesn't go to the Pats? He stays with the Jets, yada, yada. But like all those little moments of like, if you just remove this one thing, how it greatly changes the course of history. And I think of the tuck rule. And then I think of, what if the Chiefs had gotten Paxton Lynch instead of Pat Mahomes, like how that changes things, man. Just like it's wild.
I love Mahomes, so I can't even act like I would root against that. I really do think the Chiefs are like the most likable dynasty team in terms of like unanimous.
No.
I mean, not
he's
for your
so unlikable. Even in mannerisms,
Patrick Mahomes are unlikable.
Yeah, but you think Mahomes and the Chiefs are likable, especially now with the Taylor Swift stuff? They're so unlikable.
I think I love Travis Kelce. I love Travis the whole like, oh, he's not Gronk. Like, I think it's a stupid conversation.
No, I think Kelce's
two different positions.
I love
the Taylor Swift stuff. I love. I think it's so cool that
you are. I can't believe I had you on this show. I'm so disappointed in who you are as a person right now.
You invite Tay, you get Tay, baby. I'm sorry.
That's fair. You have to like her because you have the same name. I feel like you have to go like you. Like
I didn't even think about it that way, but yeah, we'll go with that. Taylor gang or die, baby.
That's right.
I will say some fun other little nuggets that came out today. Adam Schefter had Elliot Wolf on his podcast today. Okay. Ray Lewis was actually supposed to be not supposed to be, but he was almost a Packer. The Packers were on the phone with him saying, we're about to draft you. And the Ravens either already were there. I think they were on the clock and they didn't think that Ray Lewis is going to be the choice. And then Belichick was the one who wanted Ray Lewis. Belichick's draft plan was the one that the Ravens used in the first year that they were a team. It was all Belichick's draft plan. So,
because they took Ogden and Ray Lewis.
Exactly. So the Packers were going to try to draft Ray Lewis. That was very nearly a thing. Also, if we're going to talk about recent history, if Javon Baker and Jalen Polk end up being like the guys in this reset and they're Drake May's go-to targets and they're putting up numbers, that's still kind of the Bills' fault. Because if they had just gotten Leggett or if they had just gotten Coleman, then they might not have moved. They might not have been like, all right, we're going to get Jalen Polk a little later, and then we're going to get Javon Baker because we traded up. So I know this is the Pat show, but I'm just saying, you could put some blame at the Bills' feet if this whole Patriots draft class goes well on offense.
That makes me want to throw up. I don't know why you're here. You're out here showing Chiefs love and then Patriots
I like
stuff.
This. I like being on this end after last year.
That's fair. Real quick, so I looked up the 1996 NFL draft where Ray Lewis went. So he went number 26 to the Baltimore Ravens. The Green Bay Packers literally had the next pick at 27, and they took John Michaels, offensive tackle out of USC, who I've never heard of. So I'm imagining he didn't pan out that great. What a crazy draft. Yeah, the Ravens got Jonathan Ogden at 4 and then Ray Lewis at 26. And I never even thought of that idea of like them using Belichick's like draft plan, let alone knowing the Packers. Like, man, like I also wonder too, I'm a big proponent of the nature and nurture aspect of a player and like just taking a player out of one team and dropping him into another. Like, I don't think that you get the same guy. Mahomes is a good example, right? Like, he's tremendous. I don't know, and I don't think anybody can know. You can't definitively say one way or the other. He becomes the same Patrick Mahomes if he goes to the Bills at that pick instead of the Bills trading out. Like, he learned behind Alex Smith for a year. He had Andy Reid and Bieniemy, and even though people make fun of Nagy was a good offensive mind and coordinator under him, and then he got to work with Kelce and Hill and this offensive line. Like, dropping him into the chaos that was the Bills at that time, I don't know if he necessarily becomes that guy. But, man, like, and it'd be tough for, like, I don't know if Ray Lewis reaches those same heights, but the Packers in 96, they were nasty, and they were going on those Super Bowl runs and being one of the best teams in the NFL. You imagine dropping Ray Lewis into those Packers teams that were like the teams of the late 90s with Favre. And
that year.
They were a couple. Yeah. They lost in 90. I think they went that year because they lost in 98 to the Broncos because the Packers went back-to-back. They beat the Pats and then they beat the Patriots and then lost to the Broncos. The Broncos beat them and then also beat the Falcons the year after. So we had multiples. Oh man.
This is the intro. Classic us.
This is a cool thing. This is also a fun episode like to do. You know what I'm
also wait, real quick. I was thinking about it, like all the guys that Patrick Mahomes had early on in his career. You know who he didn't have that would have been ridiculous? Jamal Charles.
Oh, good call.
He'd still been there for a couple years. That would have been terrifying. With a young Tyreek, like wasn't the guy yet, but was still very clearly one of those dangerous people in football. Kelsey, Jamal Charles, and a young Mahomes.
Terrifying.
Woo, that would have been horrifying.
We're going to do an episode, especially it will come the dead time of the year when there's nothing like happening like this off season. And we're going to do the greatest like what ifs.
I like that.
This just spawned a good episode. You can pick anything you want and just change it. And then like, again, picking the breadcrumbs of what happens. Oh yeah, that's a really good one.
Get Jeffrey Wright to do the intro.
Nice. Look at you. You're just spawning all these kinds of ideas. I like it. Even though you were mean and you co-signed the Chiefs. I don't know if any dynasty is likable. And I wasn't around for like the Cowboys dynasties and the Steelers dynasties. And then I think the Niners dynasty is the most likable. Who hates Joe Montana and Jerry Rice? And Bill Walsh? Nobody.
Cowboys. I feel like
fair, but then that's it. But everybody hates Cowboys fans, so no one cares. So that it's like, it's the way. I think majority of people think Mahomes is unlikable, but maybe that's just me. I respect him. I think he's absolutely tremendous.
Like, what does anyone have?
It's all of it. It's the voice. It's the mannerisms. It's losing to the Bills in the regular season and being like, I don't know how you make that call because it's a penalty.
That was the first truly unlikable thing I think he's ever really done as a pro. Where I was like, all right, Pat, you gotta get off this horse.
Yes,
it's not it.
Well, like even I'm assuming Eric's talking about Joe Burrow. Like the Bengals have had the Bills number. I think Joe Burrow's awesome. I love Joe Burrow. I can't stand Mahomes. Like, I just think he's so unlikable. And I don't know, too.
It's because the Patriots don't really have any beef with the Chiefs. I think maybe that's it. It just hasn't really gotten to that point with me. But I love Andy Reid. Mahomes.
Yes, I love Andy.
He's goofy.
I don't think you can hate Andy Reid. Andy Reid is awesome. And Spags. Like, everybody should love Andy Reid and Spags. They're awesome. Like, oh, and then I forgot. Yeah, Joe Montana is the original Joe Cool. Oh, good call.
Joe Cool, Joe Tooney.
I mean, he's a Patriot.
He's a medium guard, but he is a lovable guy.
I know. I should hate him because he's a Pat, but he is fun. Yeah. Oh, I love this. Sespinar says, but it's the offseason, so where do you stand on K-Dot versus Drizzy? Drake is a pop artist who does rap. He is not built to stand in the arena with Kendrick. And I think Drake's first response was fine. But he opened up the floodgate. Like, he's just not built to box with God like that. And that's what Kendrick is. Kendrick is one of legitimately the best lyricists, like, ever. I think Kendrick murked him. And I know there's different little things coming out of, like, and I also think Drake's second response was not good at all. Like, it just, yeah, I think Kendrick wiped the floor with him. But I'm a huge
You've seen the It's Always Sunny clip with Danny DeVito. It's just like, that's...
Yeah, and Mac is like, that's literally the last thing. That's the last thing you want to do. If you do that, you're going to make everybody think that you did do that. And people were making that joke the night before. And then Drake came out with that track. Yeah, Laura nails it right here. Yeah, Drake got sunned hard.
And he made it worse by name-dropping Millie Bobby Brown, where it's like, bro, guilty conscience much. That's real bad.
Did you see the meme? And then we're going to get into this episode. Apologize to everyone. Did you see somebody put the meme of, you seen the second Doctor Strange, I'm assuming?
Yeah.
When he shows up to Elizabeth Olsen and he's like talking to her, trying to get her to like help her out or help him out, like with the girl. And then she accidentally name drops like, oh yeah, Erica, like blah, blah, blah. And then she pauses and she's like, you didn't tell me her name, did you? And Doctor Strange is like, nope. People did that of being like Drake saying like, or Kendrick saying like, oh, you're this. And then Drake's like, I never touched Millie Bobby Brown. And then him stopping and being like, You never said her name, did you?
That's exactly what it was. Or it's just like, bro, he had a few pretty bad slip-ups in that. There was a one where like he misunderstood an entire song.
From Mother I Sober. Yeah, he completely.
And it was just like, ooh, bad. Like bad subject matter. If you're gonna fumble, it can't be that. So yeah, I'm not big into like rap beefs or anything. I've just watched a lot of YouTube videos to make sure I like thoroughly am involved in all this.
I'm huge into rap beefs. Like I love rap and hip hop, and like I love that. I just miss 90s stuff of like, if you played sports, everybody hated each other. If you were in music, you like, and you had beef, you hated everybody. Everybody was friends. So I just like the sport of rap coming back. I don't want anybody to get like shot like what would happen in the 90s. Yeah. But yeah, and give me some more of that too in sports. I don't want to hear like, oh, no, me and my biggest rival are friends. We have the same strength and conditioning coach. We work out together. No, I want Michael Jordan level of like, no, I hate that guy, and I'm going to put him in the dirt because we're enemies forever. This is a good comment that I never thought of. So Lord Korvac says, wrong. If you were a Bills fan in the 80s and 90s, you feel the same about the 49ers dynasty. Every one of us was sick of Montana and Rice. Oh, that's fair. I also really like this.
It does get old. It just like you don't want to keep seeing this. Like I even felt that way with the Chiefs. I'm like, I'm very happy for them. I am, but now I get why people don't like dynasty. It's really annoying.
No, and it's the Harvey Dent line from The Dark Knight. You either die or hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Everybody's cool with like, oh, the plucky upstarts, and then at a certain point, it's like, ugh, like you won again. We hate you. Yeah, I think it's just. I love this wholesome comment from Roy saying that he misses ABBA, the band. I took my wife to see Mamma Mia live here, which was awesome. So shout out to ABBA. My wife will enjoy that shout out. All right. We've gone so off the rails, but this is super fun. I'm going to do this what if episode down the pike. All right. Now, this was really fun. I don't even want to talk football because this has been such a great conversation.
I didn't even remember we were here for football, to be honest.
I honestly forgot. I clicked the banner and I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's what we're here for. All right. So, the Buffalo Bills 2024 draft class through an enemy's eyes, through the perspective of the opponent, however you want to label it. Folks, if you don't know and weren't aware, I had Taylor on several weeks ago before the draft happened with the idea of doing, actually I did this episode last year too with Matt Lane from the KC Sports Network, of looking at the Bills and their potential needs through the draft, through an enemy's eyes, through the eyes of an opponent. So who do you not want the Bills to get? What do you not want them to get? So Taylor had specific things and specific players that he did not want the Bills to get and or address, certain needs, things like that. So now the draft is done. I brought Taylor back to look at those things. And I think it's a cool exercise. I think a lot of times we look at the team that you cover or the team that you're a fan of, you're often looking at them from an insider perspective. And I think it's nice to get this view from kind of like the, view from above or the outsider perspective here. So we're going to start with the first piece here, Taylor, and it was no surprise. This was your number one thing. You did not want the Buffalo Bills to get that quote unquote X receiver. The three names you mentioned were Brian Thomas Jr., Mr. A.D. Mitchell, and your boy, Xavier Legette, or I guess it's Legette now, which always drives me nuts. I feel like guys change their name.
What is it?
I do this every year. For names I don't know, I always look up interviews from them in college, and every single person who did anything with them said Legette. And then Goodell said Legette. And then apparently the Panthers put out a tweet that said it's pronounced Legette. So I'm just going to call him Xavier L from now on. We'll just go with that. But so you mentioned
wild names in this draft class. Dude, did you know that Javon Polk, it's not Polk, it's Poke, like Poke. And Javon Baker is Javon Baker. Every time I say their names, I see them in my head because I'm trying to repeat it. Like there's a lot of names that have been throwing me off in this draft.
I thought it was 100. I thought it was Javon Baker, and I thought it was Jalen Polk. Like not Polk, like Polk. Like I'm trying to pronounce like yoke. So it's yoke. Like it's Polk, like yoke. This is very interesting. All right, so
we're gonna get sidetracked.
We'll get to it eventually. So the Bills did get an X. Well, depending on how you view it, some fans still think he's a power slot. Some people think he's not built to be that guy. But long and the short of it, as we talked earlier, the Bills trade out of the first round twice. They end up with the first pick in the second round, and they take Mr. Keon Coleman, wide receiver, out of Florida State. So for you, Taylor, your biggest thing that you did not want the Bills to come away with from this draft class was that X receiver. They get Keon Coleman as an enemy, as an opponent. Do you like that pick, meaning bad for the Bills, or do you hate it and it bothers you, meaning good for the Bills and the fans? How do you feel knowing that Keon Coleman is a Buffalo Bill, and especially for you knowing that your biggest worry was the Bills coming out of this draft with an X receiver?
So considering the Pats have Gonzalez, like that kind of gives you a little more security. Like if you go into a game with a good quarterback, you're like, yeah, it can't be that bad though. Like we'll still have a shot. Keon is the kind of guy where, like, I would say Christian Gonzalez is both a good and a bad matchup for him. Because Gonzalez, like going back to last summer, he didn't really show this as much during the regular season. But in the summer, Devontae Parker was eating his lunch every day. Like would go up high point and make a catch over him. I even asked Mike Pellegrino, the cornerbacks coach, like, or is this the kind of thing where they're just working on it? Like, is Devontae giving him tips? And he was like, yeah, because he's a young guy. He's got to learn how to use his body, how to, be more competitive in those situations. I think he's going to continue to learn, which is why I think these battles are going to be really fun. But I think Gonzo is going to be on his hip all the time.
Okay.
Like, I really do like Keon Coleman.
Because he's not going to be able to separate from
Exactly.
and bigger in general. Like, that's going to be his biggest challenge. Can he separate with regularity in the stem or even at the catch point? It's because it's hard to do that consistently in the NFL.
Exactly. And I do think he can add little tricks to his game where he can really use his size and physicality and maximize those. So at the top of routes, you are always like Gronk. You're always trying to create contact, because that's how you can just basically just like fling yourself off and get the separation you need, things like that, where I think it could be more fun as they get older and they get a little more experienced. But right now, honestly, it doesn't move the needle for me a ton. Again, because the Patriots do have that number one corner where I'm like, you got to put someone really scary in front of like Gonzalez for me to be like, oh no, because as a rookie, he was playing like he'd been in the league already for 10 years. So I do like Keon. I think that he is going to have every game like 2 or 3 catches where you're just like, it happens. The guy's like 6'4". He's massive. He catches everything. He's an alpha in that way. You know, it's going to happen. For Josh Allen, where, you know, he does this whole scramble thing and he's throwing it up and just being like, hey, somebody down there win. I think he and Matt Collins now are the only guys where you really trust in that kind of vein. Matt Collins, obviously, to a totally different extent. Yeah. But I like the fit. I'm not anxious. I'm excited to see how he and Josh Allen do kind of pair together. I do think the best way to use him is to make him versatile, especially because he's a great blocker. Don't stick him at X. Put him at Z and let him like actually bully people. Yeah. I've seen him take guys to the sideline, like not really even trying. So I don't think like him living at X is the best idea. Maybe in base packages, like again, Mac Howell, just because he's a bigger guy. Maybe put Coleman at Z, and then however you want to, you know, do Kincaid and Khalil Shakir, all that. But I hope they don't use him as strictly an X. Like we talked about this off air with Kaiir Elam, where he kills it in the interview, and it's like, oh, this guy's so smart and he studies so well. And then it's like, well, you don't are in, you know, there's more nuance, but it doesn't feel like you guys are really using your strengths. So you're so impressed by how smart he was, and then it seems like you outsmarted yourself and put him in a bad spot. Again, more nuance than that. I don't follow this team like that, so I'm not going to get in the nitty gritty. I just hope they don't stick Keon on an island and just say, yep, beat every team's best corner all the time. I don't think that's how you maximize the skill set, or any guy really. Like there's very few guys who stick them at X and it's like, yes, live there, you're fine. Sorry,
Stephon Diggs, cough. When you look at the Bills team, if you're the Patriots or if you're any other team, Grant, maybe it's unfair because he's going to be a rookie and we have no comparison in terms of what he can be because he's never played it down in the league. Juxtaposing him with Dalton Kincaid, I guess, Joe, let me shift the conversation, like the focus to Kincaid. How much fear or not does Dalton Kincaid put into you, either as a Patriots guy or just an opponent in general? Like, how do you view him from an outsider perspective? Because for me, I think this pick of Keon Coleman, I think he has, with the athleticism, if he can clean up some of the finer pieces, I really think he could be a wide receiver 1. But I think more likely trajectory is like a high end 2 or really fun auxiliary piece to a true number 1, which makes me think Dalton Kincaid is more likely to be, you know, the number 1 pass catching option in this offense with his skill set, his position, the mismatch potential you can create, and also how his skill set meshes with Josh Allen, with how good of a separator he is and how Josh gravitates towards those type of guys, which is another piece that makes the Keon Coleman fit a little wonky or interesting to say the least. So my thought is that Keon here is more of, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, like I think he's more of an auxiliary piece or person to round out the basketball lineup at wide receiver, and the offense is going to funnel through Dalton Kincaid from a pass catching perspective. If that's true, if you're an opponent, which you are technically, how do you view that? Do you see Dalton Kincaid as like, man, that dude is a threat, that's a guy we have to allocate resources towards, or is he just a piece that exists in the offense that you have to account for?
I think he's someone you respect. Like I could see he would end up basically being their Travis Kelce, where he is the guy where you just funnel everything through him. Last year, Kyle Duggar did struggle against him, but I think he was sick. I remember, like, I was thinking he's getting burned in a way that you don't usually see Kyle Duggar.
You know what's funny? He got beat real bad by Knox on the game for a touchdown in New England. And all I remember the year before was literally like Kyle Duggar was like the tight end stopper, like for everyone, week in, week out. And I was like, oh, Knox beat Duggar. And the first thing that went in my brain, I was like, is Duggar hurt? Or is he like not feeling good? Like no disrespect to Dawson Knox, but my immediate thought was like, well, something's got to be wrong with Duggar. But sorry, continue.
No, the thing with Duggar is that he's very good in coverage. He is kind of stiff, but he's so athletic he can make up for it. he gets in trouble where he'll take his eye off the target or whoever the receiver is. And then that guy gets separation. He's looking for the ball. And then it's like, wait, where's the guy I was covering? He's like, oh shit, he's all the way over there. So that'll happen. I also think Marte Mapu's probably going to develop more into that tight end eraser. I think ideally Duggar is more your robber, like how back in the day where you had Chung, Devin McCourty, and Deron Harmon, where Deron Harmon's in the post, Devin McCourty is that guy who's cutting routes over the middle or just reading the quarterback. And then you got Patrick Chung as the tight end eraser. I think Marte Mapu's probably just a more fluid athlete, super dynamic in that way, where he's probably better in those man coverage situations than Duggar, obviously with his range, his intelligence, his ball skills. You want him kind of just feasting over the middle. And then Jabril Peppers, I think, in most situations, like passing situations, because he's not really big enough to go against tight ends, you could put him against running backs, but I think that's where you'd rather have like, you know, a good coverage linebacker and that Peppers kind of in the post. So to say all that, I would respect Dalton Kincaid. I'm not like going into games not thinking about him. Like kind of like with Ed Oliver, honestly, I go into games and I'm like, he's going to make a play, but I'm not like scared of Ed Oliver. It's kind of that way with Kincaid, although I would not be surprised if like one season him and Josh just absolutely click. And it's like they are putting up those kinds of like, yeah, he's a tight end, but he's really a wide receiver and a legit top option. But yeah, for right now, he just doesn't scare me that much because it's so hard to find a tight end who is that scary where you can funnel the entire offense through him. And even those guys, there's not many who are the focal point of their offense, like Sam Laporta or like freaking guy on the Vikings who looks like a Viking.
TJ Hockenson. I love the guy on the Vikings who looks like a Viking. Immediately I was like, TJ Hockenson.
We're like, they could be the center point of an offense, but they're even better because they don't have to be. And I feel like with Kincaid, he'd probably be better as the number 2, but for that role where it's like separator and then Keon Coleman's the ball winner, I could see that kind of shaking out.
I like the idea of him as being the one just because of, I mean, I'm a schematic guy and X's and O's guy. And like, I just think if you have a true dual threat tight end or pass catching option in a tight end, it presents so many mismatch opportunities. And I think you even breaking down how the Pats would deal with him speaks to that, because how many teams have a Duggar and a Peppers and a Mapu and like all these versatile second and third level dudes where you can be like, who's the apex? Who's the safety? Who's the linebacker? We can play man. We can play zone. Maybe this is a robber. Maybe it's a Tampa 2 invert. You don't know who's going where. The Pats have the opportunity to kind of, because they're such a versatile defense in that back seven, they have the opportunity to, pull different levers and push different buttons to match with teams like that. But I don't think a lot of teams are built like that. And, it's funny talking about that with the Patriots. I'm going to link that to Cole Bishop when we talk about him in a little bit. Like, I think the Pats are one of the few teams that have the defense and the personnel to be able to mix and match to the point where, okay, cool, you can take your tight end and line him up at X or put him in the slot or have him attached or have him at this. You can do whatever. We can match that with all our personnel and do whatever the hell we want to do. But I think so many other teams can't. And that's where I think, okay, maybe that's what this plan is. Like, I went into this draft thinking whoever they took at wide receiver, like if Brian Thomas fell, I think they were going to take Brian Thomas, right? So maybe that changes the plans or changes, my narrative that I'm kind of spinning here. But I went into this draft thinking whoever they took at wide receiver or didn't take at wide receiver would tell us what they thought about Dalton Kincaid. Like, are you looking for somebody who's ceiling and most likely outcome or path in the NFL or trajectory is a true wide receiver one? Or is it somebody who's more an auxiliary piece that you can pair with Dalton Kincaid because he is your one? And because of the mismatch opportunity and mismatch potential that Dalton Kincaid presents, I just think that's real interesting, especially if you look at it from like Kincaid as the nucleus. And so it's Kincaid. And then you look at Keon Coleman and what his skill set is as an auxiliary piece. You look at Curtis Samuel and what his skill set is as an auxiliary piece. Khalil Shakir, even Dawson Knox, throw him into that. Like all these different little pieces and buttons, they function differently and funnel differently if you look at Dalton Kincaid as the nucleus rather than Stephon Diggs as the nucleus or Keon Coleman as the nucleus or Brian Thomas or Xavier Worthy or whatever insert receiver here that I wanted instead of Keon Coleman. And I think that's such an interesting conversation schematically going forward for the Bills, because not just because they have Joe Brady, and I keep saying this because I really want to drive it home for people. We have not seen Joe Brady's offense with the Buffalo Bills. The offense that Joe Brady was running last year was Ken Dorsey's offense with his tweaks. So players he liked, different, play callings and patterns and things like little tweaks here and there. It's physically impossible to uninstall an offense in week 10 and install a new one by week 11. So it's just not possible. So we really haven't seen what Joel Brady's offense is and what he wants. So you've got that on the plate, and then also losing Stephon Diggs. I just think there's so many schematic conversation pieces for this offense in terms of who's their go-to, who are they going to funnel everything through? Obviously Josh Allen, but how prevalent is the run game? I think that's another aspect too, right? Like so many conversations about, and I've been tweeting this for like years, the cyclical nature of football, right? Like, teams become offenses become more pass oriented, and there's that passing boom. So what do we see? Like nickel defenses and dime defenses everywhere. Defensive tackles are now built to be penetrating one gap defensive tackles. Like the Vince Wilforks of yesteryear are pretty much like dinosaurs and don't exist. Like even Vita Vea, who is in that mold, dude can motor and is extremely athletic. But yes, absolutely. But more guys are built to, one gap and penetrate and be smaller and faster. Why? Because they're trying to get after the quarterback. And the same thing with nickel defenses. The same thing with all these too high coverage structures, trying to put a cap on everything and limit explosives. So for me, it was just a matter of time until, ironically, the Chiefs started doing it. How much longer until the offenses were like, you know what? Let's just go heavy and run the ball down teams' throats because they're light on the interior and they're playing with all these DBs, and we're going to bully them. And I wonder that a little bit. Kincaid, Knox, Keon, Coleman, do you condense and try and mash teams? Like, I just wonder if it's a cyclical piece.
And what are the Rams and the 49ers doing? Everybody thinks of them as outside zone teams. And all they do is run outside zone. Look at their splits. The Rams specialize in duo, and the 49ers specialize in power.
That's what I was going to say. The Rams are running duo to the trip side with Kupp and Nakua and then Tyler Higbee, in what they're, yeah.
No one really unless you're deep into the weeds, you don't really hear people talk about it very much. But
I talk about that.
The wide zone stuff I really think is going to start dwindling a little bit more, because now you have linebackers who can go side to side. You have defensive linemen who understand how to work those techniques.
But defenses change themselves to stop zone runs. So offenses are going to swing it back, be like, we'll run at you. We're going to run gap all day and run it down your throat.
And that's why it's for a Patriots follower, Ed Oliver doesn't scare me, because what's Ed Oliver going to do against the double team with City So and Mike and Wenu? Not a goddamn thing. He's not doing anything to stop that. So, yeah. And, I mean, that was one of my takeaways looking at this draft class. I don't know if I'm getting ahead, whatever.
No, good. No,
we're always off the rails. Ray Davis, really consistent, powerful, downhill type of running back. Then you get Cedric Van Pran-Granger, center, obviously, from Georgia. A lot of SEC competition there. Yeah. Then you get Tylen Grable and Travis Clayton, two guys who are more developmental picks, but guys who have very interesting physical profiles. At the very least, I feel like if you want to play bully ball, send those guys out as extra offensive linemen, where it's all right, yeah, only Dalton Kincaid really is going to be a little slot receiver with Keon Coleman, and we're going to come out here with Tylen Grable as a tight end, and we're going to run the ball down your throat. That's the kind of situation where it makes Josh Allen's life a lot easier. You don't necessarily need that wide receiver one all the time, because you're not putting the onus on him to consistently just slice and dice defenses. And then you make it so, okay, Josh, you just make it a handful of those crazy plays, like what Mahomes did last season. Yep. If you look at his stats, they're not crazy impressive. He had I think he was top 5 in yak rate. Not a lot of his yards were actually through the air. Yeah. Because that's what defenses were giving him. So he's I'll throw underneath. I'll run the ball. I don't care. I don't need to go bombs away. But the second you show me single coverage and you decide to cheat to one side and I've got a burner on the other, I'm going to go deep and I'm going to hit it. And I think that's kind of the world you want to see the Bills start living in, because there's so much change going on with Buffalo right now. I think it's probably best with the staff change, with all the changes that are happening to the roster outside of just Diggs. Maybe to say, Josh, we are going to help you and make your life as easy as we can so that you do not have to be the reason that we're winning games every single week.
I used to say it as a joke, but I think with what we saw with the Bills offense last year, the direction they're going in with Brady, even though maybe this is a bit ironic considering the spread offense he ran at LSU, but you see Brady's history in being a Sean Payton guy. And again, it's been talked about a bunch, you go to those Sean Payton Saints teams and the receivers were Marcus Colston and Devery Henderson and these fun role players and niche dudes and auxiliary guys, but he didn't have this nasty, crazy, true wide receiver one. And depending on
Jimmy Graham kind of like,
yeah, like, but again, mismatch tight end piece like Jimmy Graham, Jeremy Shockey, or even I know maybe this is he's polarizing for some people. I love Michael Thomas, and I don't care that he only runs slants. I think Michael Thomas is sick, and the fact that he only wins on like 2 or 3 things, like I consider him a true wide receiver 1, and that was a dude Peyton had toward the end of his years in New Orleans. But Sean Payton loves to run the ball. He loves to get the ball to his backside of the backfield, similar to what Joe Brady does. And you saw how successful the Bills' run game was last year with Dorsey and with Brady. And my thought is, you mentioned the Keon Coleman blocking piece, and then you have like the gadgetry stuff that Samuel can do and what Shakir can do inside, outside, and all these different pieces. And I just see this offense as more of like a power spread football team going into 2024, where it's condensed sets or heavy personnel and formations, and we are going to run the ball down your throat, and we're going to force you out of 2 high looks. And if you don't, fine, we're going to run the ball for 5-6 yards a clip, or we're going to go play action and gouge you for 7 to 11 yards with Dalton Kincaid, or we're going to get it to Dawson Knox in the flat and let him truck a DB and gain 8 yards on first down and make it 2nd and 2. And then our wide receiver out there, we're going to go even heavier and put, multiple big bodies. And the one wide receiver we have out there is going to be Keon Coleman, who can block. And then also, if he's in one-on-ones, we're going to hit the alert if your corner can't handle him one-on-one, and maybe we chuck it up to him, and that's when it is. I just see.
I feel like he's going to be Gabe Davis in those heavy sets. Like that seems so perfect for him.
Absolutely. I think he'll be Gabe Davis in those heavy sets from the perspective of, hey, man, we need you to dig out that safety or that edge or that outside linebacker. We need you to wash this dude down. We need you to crack on this guy. We need you to base block and form up on an edge. Or, I mean, dude, like I know fans don't want to hear it because he's polarizing. Like, we talked about Anthony Jennings the last time you were here and how great of a run defender he is. That second game, Bills versus Patriots, Gabe Davis is blocking Jennings like 5 yards off the ball and downfield. Like, he puts Jennings like on his back foot. That doesn't happen to Anthony Jennings, and that's a tip of the cap to how good of a blocker Gabe Davis is. If you can get that from Keon Coleman plus more athleticism and contested catch ability and yak and all these true one-on-one winning situations.
And the scheme touches off all that run stuff. We're just Gabe. It's like, oh, I'm blocking. Hot. No, I'm not. Then 70-yard touchdown.
All those little sneaky play action pieces that they would hit the Gabe, or what they would do to Knox against the Saints, or what they did with Gabe Davis against the Rams to open the season a couple years ago. Like, I really just see, I don't think the true passing nature or the spread nature of the offense is going to go away, but I see it packaged with more of, like a power spread type of option where you're seeing more condensed formations and condensed alignments. And I love that you brought up the Rams and Niners stuff, because I feel like people see the Shanahan-McVay stuff, maybe Shanahan more, because I think fans or casual fans are able to recognize, like, oh, they run the ball and they have Christian McCaffrey. But I think the thought with the Rams is like, oh, well, Matthew Stafford has this huge arm and they've got Nakua and Kupp, so they probably just go 5 wide every formation and chuck it around. It's like, no, they run the ball with Kyron Williams, who's also a tremendous blocker and tremendous in pass pro. They run right at you and displace you vertically, and then they work in everything off of that. And they've been doing that, honestly, for forever, back when it was Kupp and Robert Woods. Like, you have to block in that offense, and they're running trips, but it's condensed, and they're shrinking the field, and then they're expanding and attacking you out of it with the run and the pass. And I feel like football, I think, in general, is moving towards that direction. And I see more of that from the Bills as well, not just because of how it is in the bigger picture of the game, but also because of how teams are playing you. It's just a natural answer for what defenses are doing to the Bills and offenses in general. Like, and you mentioned in the zone piece is a great call. Like, if defenses are building themselves to stop zone runs, okay, start running gap runs. And then eventually when defenses build themselves back to stop gap, you run zone. Like, it's time is a flat circle. It's Rustin Cole from friggin' True Detective. Like, time is a flat circle. There is, like, nothing in football is new. Like, everything you're seeing has happened before. It's just a matter of, when do you bring it back? When do you recycle it? And it's just with the changing of the guard and the pendulum swings, defense swings it in their favor. So the offense eventually does the opposite to swing it back in their favor. And then you just have those fun pieces. And I think it's really going to be, it's such a fun conversation, the schematic piece of it, but then also adding the layer of Stephon Diggs isn't there. Josh Allen, I think, really has the opportunity to prove himself, or if he struggles at all, then that narrative is just going to come barking out of, like, you needed Diggs, you needed Diggs, you needed Diggs. But if the offense changes and, like you said, takes some off his plate, because again, the run game is really good. And if you can marry both, it's a really fun aspect.
And you look at like the way that offenses have evolved since like 2010-ish, where the big revolution at first was the Patriots and the 2 tight ends, where it's like now nobody has 3 good safeties. No. So now it's like, all right, no matter what you do, there's no answer because the league isn't ready for this yet. Then you started to see the league start to prioritize safeties more. And then you started seeing, oh, let's try the 2 tight end thing. Obviously, like no one can really do it well. But then once you get Mahomes in the league, you start seeing, you get McVay and there's the wide zone stuff and all the outside zone and the boot. And then there's Mahomes, you can take the top off. And it's okay. Now, instead of this like single high stuff where we're trying to, Legion boom, man coverage, everyone, all that. Now it's like, no, we need to get back because they're trying to take the top off. As we saw with the Patriots in the Super Bowl, they were like, all right, we'll play quarters. Can't beat quarters with what you're doing right here. The funny thing is actually the Rams were beating quarters. They were just so disheveled, and Jared Goff was terrified. He was missing some pretty open shots.
And Todd Gurley was running on one friggin' leg. But that Patriots defense was a masterclass with what they were doing, and then locking the one side with Gilmore. Like there was just nothing for the Rams to do.
And now you see like every defense is specializing in corners now. And that's the kind of go-to, all right, this is how we're going to counter it. Now that you see like Mahomes and those guys are going less bombs away and more like, let's take what the defense gives us, because as great as it is to have like $100 million man at quarterback, makes a lot more sense to make that guy's life as easy as possible. Like we said, if you can run the ball for 5 yards a pop, why in the world wouldn't you? It's a disservice to your offensive line and your quarterback, because now it's like, all right, this guy, you're just putting even more wear on his tires for the season. And if he's good enough to be around late in the season, you'd like to have him as well preserved as possible. And the best way to do that, as we saw with the Bills when they were really kind of running that ground game was going, just run the ball, make things easy, and then make it an unpleasant surprise when Josh Allen decides to throw a bomb and not something that everybody and their mother is expecting on every single drop pass.
Yes, and not to mention, too, like the explosives you can generate from play action and how good most quarterbacks are good off of play action anyway, but especially Allen. Like I feel like play action for what it is, I don't know if it's the rhythm of it or the comfortability. It just gets his mechanics right. When he's really good in terms of like hiding the ball and selling that run fake, but it gets his feet right. It gets his motion. It gets his timing. Like you watch him, run fake, drop, step, hitch, throw. It's on time. It's comfortable. It's fluid. And it gives you the opportunity to hit some of those explosives versus coming out in more of a traditional passing formation and struggling to pass the ball down the field because there's a cap on the defense and having to work underneath. So like if teams are putting that cap on you, you can get Xavier Worthy or Brian Thomas and these dudes that are crazy fast and still try to push it vertical and see what happens and create separation in the intermediate, which can work. Or you can force defenses out of those 2 high shells by running the football, going with heavier personnel, but then having that heavier personnel present mismatches downfield like Dalton Kincaid or like Keon Coleman. And I just think that was my biggest takeaway with like Coleman coming in was I think it means Kincaid is the true one in that pass catching room. Coleman is an auxiliary piece, a nice one, and we'll see how he fits. But I think the nature of this offense is going to change as offenses I think in the NFL are starting to change, but then even more so with that kind of piece for Kincaid. Anything else on Keon Coleman before we move on to the next topic?
Not much. I'll just say when you mentioned Josh Allen under center, I will say anytime the Patriots play the Bills, the scariest thing for me is when Josh Allen's under center, because you really don't know what's going to happen. It's like, well, if it's play action, you have to respect the run anyway.
Yes,
so
you have to.
That is the worst situation to be in, is when you have to respect the run and Josh Allen's a quarterback. So I'll just end with that. I pretty much said everything I need to say about Keon Coleman. I think he's a fun player. I'm excited to see his career, and I'm rooting for the guy. I don't care what team he's on. I just hope they use him well and maximize his talents, and then we just get some fun performances out of him. At the end of the day, man, we can have rivalries and everything, but we want to watch good games. And if Gonzo and Keon Coleman are just like freaking clash with the Titans twice, 3 times a year, I'm all for it.
Man, I love Christian Gonzalez so much.
We talked to him the other day, or was it today? It was today. He's awesome. He's so nice. It was funny. I asked him about Jalen Polk. Obviously, they were both in the Pac-12, and he goes, yeah, I've been keeping tabs on him, but we don't like UW.
That's funny.
Like, dead serious. And he doesn't really do that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And then he was like, yeah, no, like Polk's a great player. He got a touchdown against us. Wasn't against me, though. I will say that. It was on the other side, and then you looked it up, and Gonzo's on the other side against
That's
Rome,
funny.
and then Polk's taking the top off. So, yeah, just quick Gonzo story.
There was I've said this before on the show, like I like Jalen McMillan actually more than I liked Polk. Or no, Polk now, I guess I gotta say. I'm never gonna get that right. And one of the things that I really like with McMillan was going back to his 2022 tape when he was the number 2 behind Rome. And Polk really emerged because McMillan got hurt in 2023. But they're playing Oregon, and McMillan is downfield one-on-one against Christian Gonzalez. And it's a jump ball situation, and Gonzalez goes up in high points and beats him to it. But McMillan also gets up, and as they come down, he rips it away from Gonzalez. And when that happened, I was like, oh, because like Gonzalez was my CB1 that year, and I thought so highly of him. And for McMillan to do that, yeah, man, like I love Christian Gonzalez so much. And that real quick, one last piece, like you mentioned the Allen dropback stuff, especially when you have guys like Kincaid and even Knox with his athleticism. If you can suck in those second level defenders, and your tight ends or Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir or whoever, like have that speed and athleticism to then get behind the second level, and now they have more speed to do it or more room to do it because you've sucked in some of those defenders with the run fake. There's just so many fun things that can happen schematically. Cole Bishop, your third piece here. I'm going in order of the Bills picks, but the third, so you did your top 3 things that you thought the Bills had to address in the draft last time you were here. The number 1 piece was that true X and that wide receiver group. The third piece was the safety room and the safety grouping. Bills with their second pick, I guess, listen to you technically, at pick 60, went with Cole Bishop out of Utah. How does he move the needle for you? What does he make you think? What does he make you do? And I preface that, and I also wanted to say, this is what I was going to mention earlier when talking about the Patriots defense. The Cole Bishop pick, I think, is really interesting for me because I had him as my safety 6, I think, but I don't really view him as like a true safety as much as I do just kind of like a monster man jack that you can put anywhere. And I don't mean this disrespectfully to him. I like him less the further he gets away from the line of scrimmage. Like I like him less as a single high safety or as a split field safety, even though he can function in both. I like him as an apex or big slot, nickel, however you want to verbalize it. Second level defender. You're blitzing him. He's covering the flat. He's in man coverage against your tight end. He's man covering the running back. You might send him on a cross dog blitz inside. He's so fun in and around the line of scrimmage. And I wonder how he fits in the Bills defense. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. Like, I thought he was best suited for a team like the Ravens or the Patriots, who run these dime, personnel groupings where you don't know who the safety is, who the slot's going to be. Hey, we have this traditional alignment. And then the next thing you know, one of the slots is dropping as a split field safety, and it's actually cover 2. And then, but the single high safety pre-snap is actually the pole runner in the middle, except he's not running from the line and gaining depth. He's coming from top down. All these fun things. Like, I thought Cole Bishop's skill set would be best utilized in a defense like that, like the Patriots, ironically. But nonetheless, the Bills take him. They do have this tremendous history of developing dudes in the secondary. Does he move the needle for you at that safety position, considering you ID'd it as a position the Bills needed to address in the draft?
One, when you're talking about all these disguises, are you thinking of the game where the Bills came to Gillette in 2022 and Bill literally threw the kitchen sink at Josh?
Yeah.
There was like a 3rd and 18 where they showed one look and then 3 people went to positions where you could not have possibly expected them to go post.
There were so many, between watching Bills Patriots games and then watching the Pats, in preparation for those games, or watching other offenses who are playing the Pats by extension, there's just so many times where I'm not watching the Patriots defense, I'm watching the offense. But then as the play is finishing, I'm like, how did Jalen Mills get to center field? He was lined up at defensive tackle pre-snap. What's going on? And it's just all these weird things. And it just, gives me that appreciation for, and you see that a lot. Spags does it. Lou Anarumo does it. Belichick was doing it. When you have
that's where he got it from. I think Lou was a big inspiration for what they were doing in 2022.
He's tremendous with that, and it worked against the Bills. Yeah, and I think Belichick borrowed some of that, and it's only possible because you have those players that you can do that with. If you have a player that's in the slot but sucks there, no one's going to care if he's there or not. It's the fact that Duggar's at the apex and he can do that. Or he might drop and be a split field safety because he can do that. Or he might be in the post because he can do that. Or he might just stay as right. Or he might blitz, or he might just be a low hole player. it's because they have that in their skill set. You know, they can do all those things reasonably well. And then all these other guys can do it around him, which again is why, like, I thought like Cole Bishop fitting in that kind of defense that's more havoc based and not static in terms of the coverages and what they do, which also makes me think maybe the Bills are moving towards some more of that. Maybe they go into the world of simulated pressures and more creepers and they disguise things, or maybe they're looking to go more dime or do some different things personnel wise on third downs or known passing downs. But yeah, I'm interested to see kind of what they do and how they function him and Taron Johnson in conjunction, because Taron Johnson, they're all pro nickel. Every once in a while, I think maybe like 7 times, so it's probably less than even once in a while, they would do some stuff where he was dropping as like the split field safety in a cover 2, and they would drop him from the slot to split field safety, usually to the boundary side, and then they would run like Tampa 2 invert or like a Tampa 2 robber where Micah Hyde is the
exact same. Yes. They would do that with Miles Bryant, where like anytime they wanted, I asked Kyle Duggar when they do that, and he would not give me an answer. He's like, oh, it's just, I don't think he was lying. He basically said it's just a field thing where sometimes they'll be like, all right, like whoever the strong safety is, I'm coming down.
Yes.
You're the safety, and we're going to get more physicality at the line, and then you get your range on the back end. I know exactly what it's one of my favorite disguises. I love it.
I absolutely love it. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I was going to mention it, but I couldn't remember in my head if the example I was thinking of was Miles Bryant dropping to the split field safety or if it was Marcus Jones. And I couldn't remember who was doing it. And I think and so when you said Miles Bryant, I immediately remember. I get my numbers confused all the time. And then both of those guys are smaller, even though Marcus Jones is even smaller than Bryant. But yeah, it's just like, I think all those fun pieces, and if Bishop is a move in that direction, regardless, does he move that needle for you? Again, because I think maybe not necessarily in today's day and age, but like 60, that's a good investment on a safety in the NFL today, considering like where these guys go and how much money they command. So does it do anything for you? Does it change your mind on that safety grouping, knowing how much of a vulnerability you thought it was before the draft?
One, so funny. I think we just spent 10 minutes and I didn't even answer the question yet. But
so much of this is schematic based. Like that's what it is. 100%. That's what you gravitate towards. I gravitate towards. And I think that's also accidentally we came to this conclusion. Like that's my thought for so many of these Bills picks, especially early on with Bishop and Coleman, because of the schematic nature of what it means for each side of the ball. Because I don't think Bishop or Coleman, neither are really what they look towards traditionally at those positions based on what they've been offensively and defensively. So my question really, like for myself, is, okay, is this just, no, we're taking this guy and we can mold him into what we want? Or is it more of a potential departure from the norm and what they've been recently in a move into a different ground? Because again, like I think Cole Bishop can end up being a fine, like, cool, you play him single high every once in a while. Cool, you play him in split high looks. He can be a fine traditional safety, but I think he's best as like a robber, low hole, apex type player in and around the box and line of scrimmage. Again, like what the Patriots do with so many of their guys. So to see the Bills take him, I do find interesting. Sorry, I get super excited with this conversation. Go ahead, do your thing.
Is he not just like better Taylor Rapp? Am I wrong there?
So that's also the piece too, not to be disrespectful, like Mike Edwards is probably, with Rapp, Bishop, and Edwards, all three of those guys are more Jordan Poyer than they are Micah Hyde. Edwards is probably the closest you could push towards the Hyde bucket, but you're really forcing it. So that's also part of my question too with Bishop, Rapp, and Edwards. And I know both Bishop's time 40 was, being in the 4.45, and it runs faster than Rapp and Edwards. I don't think he necessarily plays like 4.45. He's not slow, but I just don't think he's, Lightning McQueen all over there. Shout out to Cars. So I do think there is some of that kind of redundancy a little bit. Yeah, like he's more athletic Taylor Rapp, or younger athletic, better coverage Taylor Rapp, which isn't necessarily bad, but it just felt like kind of doubling down or tripling down on that safety spot. Whereas again, not just because it's low hanging fruit because you're here, when you juxtapose it with what the Pats were, like Devin McCourty was different than Duggar, and Duggar is different than Peppers, and what Jalen Mills is and what Bryant is, and all these guys that they work into different spots in the secondary. And so, but specifically with the safety, like I see Bishop in more of the Taylor Rapp mold, just being more athletic and coverage versatile, but still being in more of that mold.
Yeah, so like I'll go start with the Patriot example. people say that their safeties all kind of do the same thing, which I understand because they're kind of more box specialists, but like Jabril Peppers is the very disciplined veteran. So he can play center field. People don't really give him credit. They act like he's not good at that role. I thought the number of plays he made and the fact that he didn't give up like any big plays and made up for other people, I thought he was fine in that role. So I see him kind of in that vein. I see Duggar as the guy where you really want him close to the line of scrimmage, maximize his ball skills. Martin Mapu at this stage in his career, I think can do everything, but I don't think he's big enough to be the linebacker that they like in some packages. Where like in big nickels, sometimes it'll look like a true 3-4. You just have a safety at linebacker. I don't think he can do that the way Peppers and Duggar can, but I do think he's a looser, more explosive athlete. So that's where it's like they have overlapping skill sets, but you can see where they would fit in different ways to maximize.
Yes, absolutely.
With Bishop, I see him as the Duggar, where he's kind of the queen. You move him and he's the piece where it's like, I really want a robber here. I think that there's a good chance he can make a play, or this tight end, I don't want to risk having him just run one-on-one. We're going to put him on. Like, I think that's what he's going to be. Edwards, I think just because he's a veteran, probably is that free safety type where it's just like, don't make mistakes pretty much. Like if we don't have a real free safety, we just want the guy who's not going to screw up at the end of the day. That's making a play as a free safety is a bonus. And then Rapp is kind of your in-between guy where it's like, all right, now where's the strong safety that isn't in the slot, or, you know, however the rotation works out. I feel like probably by later in the season, maybe we'll see, I don't know if Rapp can be the free safety with then Bishop as, you know, the number 2 and then Edwards is out. I don't know your team that well. But I would predict that Bishop, whenever he's ready, is kind of that key piece who moves around based on what the priority is in the coverage, with Edwards being that veteran guy who's not going to screw up on the back end, and then Taylor Rapp kind of doing whatever fits best for him, given whatever role it's
So real quick then. So that I think that's a very fair
come back to this to my right, by the way. I'm going to do victory laps.
That's fair. And I think, but I think that's a natural thought to have in terms of the progression. But then my question is, who's coming off the field? Because they're already in nickel. So the Mike Edwards is coming off.
Unless you think Bishop is the queen. I'm so confused.
I thought that I was going to pull up that comment. I thought that was a very good chess reference.
That was well done. I think unless you're not confident that Bishop can be like an every down player, why are you keeping Mike Edwards on the field? For what? Unless you really don't like Rapp as a center fielder, then I feel like you got problems.
See, that's it. Like I like Mike Edwards better as a center fielder than I do Taylor Rapp. Like I think he has more range than Taylor Rapp. Like if we're looking at Bishop, Rapp, and Edwards, Bishop has the best versatility. Edwards is probably the best center fielder. Rapp is by far the best tackler, especially coming from depth. Even though I know people make the friendly fire jokes, but he's a tremendous tackler. Like they're all like this, almost the same player, just slightly different dials and different turns. Like they all have the same build in an RPG. Like there's no real differences except little tweaks here and there, which is what makes me so like, what do you do? Like, I don't know who's coming off and who's going where. Like last year we saw so many 3 safety looks, but that was because Matt Milano was out. So they brought Poyer in to be the Matt Milano role with Terrell Bernard. And then you had Hyde and Rapp back as your safeties, which I always thought was weird because I thought Rapp would be better in and around the box and Poyer's better deep, but whatever.
Especially with the injury history, that's kind of bizarre.
Absolutely. And especially with how good Rapp was as like a dime linebacker against the Bengals in the Super Bowl, like covering down on Jamar Chase and stuff. So like I could see that happening again, but then that means you have to take one of Milano, Bernard, or Taron Johnson off the field. Or does that mean you're going with 3 down? Like you're taking a defensive lineman off the field? So then are you only rushing 3, or are you blitzing one of the linebackers or one of the apexes? And that's where my question comes in, because I like the schematic potential, but I don't necessarily see the fit right now based on what the defense looks like from a roster perspective, and also what they've done traditionally and what they are from a structure perspective.
So if it's a passing down, I think like Bernard off the field is pretty easy. Like,
oh no, he's so good in coverage, but that's.
But I'm saying if you want the safeties, like if you want athleticism, that's probably where you might want Rapp going to be, and then you have your 3 safeties. I'm also thinking from a Patriots perspective where they rarely like don't have 3 safeties on the field.
Oh yeah,
it's really just like their basic nickel, and everything else they find some way to use a safety.
And that's what like the improvement, if there is one, for taking Bernard off for Bishop is so marginal versus like taking, I don't know, just taking somebody else at pick 60 that would have seen more regular snaps without forcing another good player off the field. That's why I see so many like, and then the contract situations, like Mike Edwards is on a 1-year deal. So maybe he's just flat out the odd man out, and maybe he's safety 3. Maybe the starters aren't Edwards and Rapp, and maybe it's Bishop and Rapp or Bishop and Edwards. Because even though Rapp is on a 3-year deal, it really only functions like a 1 year with what his dead cap looks like. I'm just so it's fun, but I just don't see the fit right now because I don't know where he goes. Like I think he's best as an apex and in and around the box, but you're not taking your all pro corner off the field at the slot in Taron Johnson. And yeah, so is Rapp coming off? Is Bishop just staying on because Bishop's just one of the straight up starters, and that means hey Edwards, you're on a 1 year deal, you're safety 3 now. Thanks for, but that's also I mean it happens, but like Mike Edwards was just the starting safety for like the Super Bowl champions, and before that he was with the Bucs as their starter and crushing it. But now he's going to be like safety 3 behind Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop. But then like you gave Taylor Rapp a 3-year deal. Are you really ready to cut bait already and put Bishop ahead of him? Granted, you don't know you're going to get Cole Bishop or anybody when you sign these guys. It's just so fun and interesting to think like who goes where and who does what. And I just think your comment too is so funny of like, aren't they all just versions of Taylor Rapp?
Pretty much. Like I think you got to ignore contracts in this to some degree, because if you have guys that overlap that much, it's just, okay, who's our best free safety? And then we work from there.
Yeah.
That's the one thing where it's like, all right, we may have guys who legitimately just aren't good at this. Like Bishop probably shouldn't be playing free safety. Taylor Rapp is just so much better in other spots. And I think Mike Edwards, again, he's on a 1 year deal. It's not like he's exactly got the rights to be like, oh, I'm not playing this. It's like, no, you're probably going to play whatever we ask you to play. You're on a 1 year deal.
No, you're the third safety. Shut up.
Right. But so I don't know, man. I feel like this is going to be one of those things that we don't know till camp. Like with the Patriots, it's, can Caden Wallace play left tackle? We could talk about it in circles, but it's like, all right, let's see what happens on the field. That's ultimately going to dictate it because we really have no idea. We just have what we can go off of. And yeah, what it looks like, probably going to be Edwards just because he seems like he's the only guy who can do that center field stuff. And I don't know how you take a safety in the second round and don't play him. That just looks really bad.
That's my thought too. Like, because even last year, right? Like the Bills took Osiris Torrance in the second round. Ryan Bates was penciled in to be the starting right guard, and he was going to be a good right guard, like high floor, like athletic, fun. And then it was like, okay, they took Torrance. Who's going to win that right guard job? And once camp started, it wasn't even like who's going to win that right guard job. Once camp started, it was like, nope, Osiris Torrance is with the ones, and he pretty much stayed with the ones. And so I think, maybe we'll get some indication early on. And yeah, maybe my brain is just going too sideways of the conversation of thinking like, Mike Edwards has kind of earned a spot, but maybe it's not. Maybe they're like, oh no, Cole Bishop's here. And now Mike Edwards is the guy who is the coverall behind Rapp and Bishop. But then even that, like, again, like I think Mike Edwards is the best center fielder out of all three. So like you're taking a hit. So how much too high are you playing?
And I see a comment where like you rotate the safeties like the D line. I understand where that's coming from, but you really rotate the defensive line more because of attrition. And you want to make sure that the big guys are like, they can breathe. Safeties are some of the best athletes on the field, on the planet. So those guys, you don't really want to be rotating out safeties. You'd like guys to have defined roles for them to get a groove in those roles and really like get that sync. It's similar on the defensive line. You do need chemistry with line games and stunts and all that, especially with an attacking front like the Bills. But the secondary, it's even more important because there's so many moving parts and so much space that you'd like guys to be like, all right, I'm comfortable in this role versus, I'm going to be in for 3 plays and you're going to take me out just because. That just creates kind of a weird dynamic in a secondary.
You need comfortability and chemistry and the understanding of like who your dance partner is on every snap. And so it's a different dynamic. And I'm really interested. Once they took him, I was like, because like I liked him. I didn't love him. Just even as like in a vacuum, like him as a player, there are some things that concerned me about him. Again, just where I thought his strengths were. And then even like part of the reason I don't like him the further he gets away from the line of scrimmage is I don't think he plays as fast as his 40 time indicates. And then he's got like some change of direction, stiffness or hip stiffness where like if he gets turned going the wrong way, opening up and going the other way, or even speed turning over this shoulder and trying to cut it off, like isn't the best path for him. So I don't want him to live as a single high safety. But again, if they're playing 65% middle of the field open coverages, like, does it even really matter that much? You can probably get away with it if having a Rapp or Bishop be the single high safety if you're only running it 35% of the time. So if you're predominantly quarters and cover 2 and cover 6 type of team, fine, whatever. And then if you're throwing in disguise stuff from every now and again with who's going to be the robber and Taron Johnson's dropping and doing stuff, like maybe it's fine. But yeah, it is very interesting to kind of see, kind of try and put the writing on the wall together and kind of put the puzzle pieces together ahead of time. Bishop is like the real interesting one for me. And again, knowing that safety was a position of need for you, I thought it was interesting to kind of get your thoughts there, what you get.
And also just with this defense, and I know they like to spin the dial and play a little bit of everything, but I also know almost no defense doesn't major in cover 3. You just kind of have to play it for survival so that you can defend the run and have some level of like solid coverage on the back end. And I know the Bills like to play man coverage in some obvious pass situations. So
yeah, they started to do that more as the season went on last year, especially like 2-man, like they were playing it legitimately.
So like, I feel like it's tough to say, all right, even if they go more middle field open, because how much are you still even playing? Like you can major in it, but that's still probably going to be like 40% of the time at least that you're still playing with the middle of the field closed, and somebody's got to be back there. So if a team is like, all right, I have a pretty good bead on when these situations are going to happen, we're going to attack this guy because he's usually there. You know, that's where you start to be like, all right, what are we going to do just so the defense can function and we don't have like a glaring weak spot where, like, again, it seems like that's Mike Edwards because he's got so much experience. But yeah, you know, I feel like I'm talking myself in circles. I don't know, but it is an interesting conversation.
And it's the schematic piece of it. I just wonder what direction they go in, because there's no previous course that shows us, oh, well, in the past they would do, again, like if he was a Patriot or a Raven or like one of those teams that I envisioned the fit for, you know, like, oh, he's going to play the so-and-so role like so-and-so used to do. And it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. There's the fit. And here I'm just like, cool. Is he just straight up beating somebody out? And then maybe that's it. Maybe for as much as we know, yeah, Mike Edwards is just riding the bench and it's going to be Rapp and Bishop, or maybe it's Edwards. And I just keep coming back to the center field. But yeah, conversation for another time.
It's funny because it's like, so we got new, better Taylor Rapp, but then we still have Taylor Rapp, and then we have older Taylor Rapp.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I don't know, like, they're all just versions of Taylor Rapp in some way or shape or another. Like, it's funny you say it like that, because I was just saying that they were all versions of, like, they were all just different shades of the Jordan Poyer bucket, and which made me think they would gravitate towards more of, especially with the not redundancy, but how much overlap there was between Edwards and Rapp. I just figured they would look more towards a post safety type of dude, or traditional, more of a free safety, or not that it necessarily exists anymore, but like somebody who has more of that range in their repertoire. But no, I don't know. We'll see. The other piece that you had mentioned when you were on here previously was the defensive line and the offensive line needing to be addressed for the Buffalo Bills. You talked a little bit. That's funny. Rapception, like Taylor Rapp and Inception combined. I like that. That's a good one. Well done. We talked about the offensive line a little bit. We didn't talk about the defensive line, but we can talk a little bit about a bit more about the O-line if you want, or the D-line. We can start wherever. How do you feel? Do you think the Bills improved on the trenches? They take Dwayne Carter with their 3rd round pick they acquired from the Kansas City Chiefs. So effectively, the Chiefs got Xavier Worthy for the Bills, getting Keon, Coleman, and Dwayne Carter. So they get Dwayne Carter to be that rotational 3-tech behind Ed Oliver. Then they also take Cedric Van Pran Granger, who you noted, center from Georgia, who could potentially start. I know there was some smoke that Aaron Cromer told him, or either Aaron Cromer said, or Brandon Beane said, or Van Pran Granger said something about him being like potentially being a guard, but I don't think he has the arms or the size or frame profile to do it. But I mean, Aaron Cromer knows far better about offensive line play than I do, so maybe there's some fire to that smoke. Or maybe he wins out at center and pushes McGovern back to left guard. And then they do take the Flyers, you know, like you mentioned, at the back end of day 3 to kind of add some athleticism and some dynamic to that group. If you're an opponent of the Buffalo Bills, like you are, whether it's the Patriots or somebody else, how do you feel about this trench grouping? You know, Dwayne Carter could be potentially playing a significant role for this team, being behind Ed Oliver, and how much the Bills rotate and NFL defenses rotate in general now. That offensive line that was such a sturdy group last year is much different with Mitch Morse gone and Ryan Bates gone as a backup. Now Dave Edwards is a starter, McGovern's at center, but you bring in Van Pran Granger, all these pieces to consider. What are your thoughts on the Bills' trenches after this draft, considering you thought it was a position group they needed to address on both sides?
So in terms of the defensive line, I know they're an even front, but I feel like the best way to maximize these guys would be with an odd front, so you could have Keon Jones in the middle and then Carter and Ed Oliver on the field at the same time, especially if you're going to go with Carter in the 3rd round when people were saying he was like a 5th round pick. It's like he should probably be on the field a good amount, not just rotating with your best player who you don't want to not be on the field. We talked about how they don't have a lot of depth, but also they don't really have great starters. That was the biggest thing. It's like, yes, Ed Oliver is good, but then it's kind of like, all right, Greg Rousseau could become that guy, but still it's a bit of a projection. I like Javon Solomon. I like that you do get a pass rusher, and that does give you something that you were lacking. Yeah. But even still, it kind of feels like, yeah, so you got rotational pieces for a defensive line that really needed some guys who I feel like are going to be more significant contributors. I don't know. Like, it doesn't totally move the needle for me. Again, like a situational pass rusher can be a big difference maker. Like we've seen that with Bryce Huff when Josh Uche is in his bag. But, you know, at the same time, it just doesn't do a lot. He's still a 5th round pick, Javon Solomon. Like, I'm not going to go crazy or anything. I'm going to wait till he's on the field, even if I do think he could be a quality player. And again, Dwayne Carter, I don't know why you would get a guy like that in the 3rd round if you're not intending on using him a lot. So I don't know your guys' scheme. I don't know if maybe they're going to use more multiple fronts to try to be more stout against the run, so you can get those 2 big defensive tackles. Maybe use your other guys as more of like true outside linebacker types. I don't know. You could also just do like still 4-3 where, you know, you can make all that work. I think all the scheme stuff is all kind of baloney as long as you know how to run it. But defensive line doesn't really move the needle for me. Offensive line is kind of similar. Like, yes, they got a good center. So maybe Connor McGovern goes back to guard, and then it's kind of similar to what you already had, which is like it's a good offensive line. I'm not saying it's bad or anything like that, but it doesn't do so much where I'm like, oh, like there really weren't honestly a ton of picks in this draft for the Bills where I was really like, okay, that's tough. Keon's probably the closest thing. And I also understand they had to make it work with the capital they had and all that. I do like what they did later, also kind of bulking up the trenches and trying to make an effort there. I did appreciate that, and the defensive front in general and the offensive line. But yeah, man, I feel kind of the same way about the trenches as I did before. Maybe a little more worried in passing situations that, you know, they're not only relying on 50-year-old Von Miller to, you know, give whatever he's got left in his lower body and try to get a sack. But yeah, I like the moves. If I were completely objective, would be fascinated to see how these are going to develop and how they use these guys. But yeah, I mean, you just didn't get, I think, the level of impact player I would have expected considering what we were talking about, where one, the lineups aren't great, where it's not a good rotation, and you do have that. But even still, it's not a lot of guys where really you go into the game and you're like, all right, we can't let that guy wreck the game. It's really just Ed Oliver and then Daquan Jones if he's healthy.
That's a fair point. And I think that's kind of where my concern with how I thought the board was going to fall, which is why I wanted to go, like, I still would have taken Johnny Newton at pick 33 because I thought he was, even though he would be the backup to Ed Oliver, he gives you such a strong top 3 with him, Daquan, and Ed. And then on passing downs situations, it's Newton and Oliver who are on the field. And I thought I wanted him because I thought you needed more of an impact player on that defensive line. I didn't think you were going to get one at edge. I thought the big 3 would be gone before you picked at 28, which they were. My only hope was potentially getting like Marshawn Nealand or Chris Braswell at 60, but both of them were gone. And even with Braswell, I don't think the pass rush upside is necessarily there, but I think he can be an edge too in this league because of how he plays the run and then his ability to go through dudes on the outside. He's got some moves, not a ton. I think the upside is higher for Nealand, but that's kind of what I was hoping for on the D line because I didn't like how this edge class really shook out. I think there is value to Solomon. I'm probably going to be putting out a film video on him later this week. I was going to do it on the back episode or the back end of the episode tonight, but I had this crazy headache and I just could not stare at the computer to cut up the film, so I couldn't get it done. But you needed impact players on the defensive line. And like we talked about the last time, because, you know, Greg Rousseau, I think, is an edge 1 against the run. I think he's a 2 against the pass, which is fine. He could be a 1 against both by the time this year ends with what his trajectory has been each year, improving. We have no idea what we're going to get from Von Miller. I think the best possible hope is he can be an edge 2, which is fine. If you got 2 2s, that's awesome, but that means you don't have a 1. AJ Epinesa is more of an edge 3. Maybe he can be a 2. And then who's winning that 4th spot? Is it Casey Toohill, who they brought in from Washington, who's more of a hustle dude and more of a run-setting guy? Is it Kingsley Jonathan? Is it going to be Javon Solomon? Like, is it DeJuan Smoot now, who they brought in from Jacksonville, who also can reduce down and play some defensive tackle in passing situations?
You were jazzed about that signing, yeah.
Yeah, I have liked him for several years. My biggest hope with it is he tore his Achilles in week 16 of 2022. Didn't come back until mid-October last year. Started saying at the end of November he was finally feeling better and starting to get into like shape that he would be in if he got to do a training camp. So he wasn't really hitting stride until like December, and even then he was still less than a year removed from a torn Achilles. So I'm hoping this could be like a 1-year flyer where he recaptures more of who he was prior to 2023, because who he was, dude, you said it, like, I think he was so unappreciated on that D line because of what the Jags, Josh Allen was, and then drafting Trayvon Walker and the buzz around him. Smoot was nasty off the edge and on the interior, and he fits their mold of being a compression style guy with some moves, but he's long, he's thick, he's violent inside and outside. I think that could end up being a guy like, does he win the fourth edge spot? But even so, like, I don't think Smoot is built to be like necessarily like the one that you need to pair with a Greg Rousseau. And then you're looking at inside and it's like, okay, I think Ed Oliver's sweet. I think Daquan Jones was going to be an all-pro last year had he stayed healthy. But then what do you get after that? So you get Dwayne Carter, who I think is that rotational 3-tech behind Ed Oliver. So you're hoping trying to mitigate some of that pass rush and penetration drop-off when Ed Oliver's off the field. Austin Johnson or Eshawn Williams is probably going to be the backup 1-tech to Daquan Jones. I think it's more going to be Austin Johnson, and then you figure out the rotation and kind of how it goes from there. I like Dwayne Carter. I just think he's more of, and I don't mean this negatively, like, he's just a role player. Like, I think he's going to be a really solid rotational 3-tech. He's going to offer you some pop and penetration. He'll make a couple tackles for losses in games and kind of cause havoc, but I don't know how much he necessarily moves the needle, to your point, in terms of strike and fear. And then offensively, I think that Van Pran Granger pick could end up being one of the best ones of this draft. If you get a starting center on day 3 who fits your archetype and your skill set of what you like at the position, I don't mind Connor McGovern at center and Edwards at left guard, but Edwards was so good last year as that 6th offensive lineman, and McGovern was solid at left guard, and even more so in the conversation, and people have pointed this out, Deion Dawkins had arguably his best season ever as a pro last year, playing next to Connor McGovern as his left guard. I just think there's so many positives towards keeping McGovern there and having that continuity. And then if you can get a starting center with cost control who plays well in the 5th round, that's like a really good value. And I think that kind of moves the needle back towards getting that offensive line to where it was last year, where I thought they were above average and solid in pass pro, solid in the run game, allowed you to be versatile and do so many things. That one gets me more excited. No disrespect to Carter. I just think his ceiling is maybe not even his ceiling, but I just think his role is rotational 3-tech, especially with how he gets displaced against the run on base blocks and like solo blocks, but on double teams especially. And he's got such tremendous hands. He's got shock ability in his hands, but he's like late to shed all the time. You'll watch him jack dudes up, and then he's late to shed, doesn't make the tackle, and the running back runs in the gap right next to him. So if he can clean up some of those, he can be more impactful. I think Van Pran Granger has the biggest chance to move the needle because I think he's got the capability of being every down starter as a rookie or even going into year 2, depending on what you do. I think Carter will definitely provide value, but it's going to be more of a rotational role. But to your point, I would have liked them, again, and this is all depending on how the board fell, especially defensively, I would have liked them to get more of an impact player on the defensive line just because I think there's so many questions because, to your point, I like the depth that they have. Like, they've got really good functional depth. They've got a bunch of 2s and 3s and 4s, which is awesome with how much you need to rotate. I just don't think they have that top-end quality, and that really kind of scares me. But even though traditionally I am a fan of give me as many B and B plus guys as you can, I'd rather take a whole bunch of B pluses than have a couple A's and a bunch of B minuses and C's. Give me all the B's and B pluses. Like, build me an entire Madden team out of 85 to 89 rating dudes. I don't care. Like, I don't want 3 or 4 95s and a bunch of like low 80s and 70s. Give me all the 85s to 89s. And I think that's what the Bills potentially could have on the D line, but it scares me a little bit knowing they don't have that top end. Granted, they were a bit handcuffed on how the board fell and the capital that they did have.
Yeah, I do agree. I think the Van Pran Granger, that's going to be super.
Dude, I just call him VPG. It's VPG? So hard to say.
Okay, that's what I'm going with.
Because the Van and the Pran and the Granger, it's like Sally sells seashells by the seashore. And I've already screwed that up. It's hard, man.
It's all right. It's getting late. But, in terms of the one that's going to set one of those units in line to be more successful, I would agree. Like if Osiris Torrance does take a step forward, doesn't get his lunch handed to him twice a year by Christian Barmore, I do think that this could be a line that legitimately does look even better than it did last season, as solid as they were, especially as a unit.
Yeah, and the offensive line is still one that I came into the offseason thinking like, man, you know what we can hang our hat on? You got this really good offensive line, this solid 5. You've got a really great backup still in Ryan Bates, even though Edwards is gone. And then they traded Bates, Morse is gone, and they changed the one thing that I was super happy about. And then Diggs goes as well. And there's so many moving parts on the offense. So if you could get me back to some stability on the offensive line, man, yeah, I would really like that. Overall, we've looked at some specific positions and kind of the spots you thought the Bills needed to address in the draft. Overall, when you look at this Bills roster on paper, where do you think they currently are most vulnerable? Now, this could be something on paper, just looking at the roster. This could be something schematic, anything and everything that comes to mind for you. When you look at this team or think of this Buffalo Bills team, where do you think they are most vulnerable on the roster?
I would say, is Matt Milano going to be healthy to start the season?
Bro, yeah.
Because if not, I would say the middle of your defense is looking not great, especially again with Daquan Jones. We don't really know what's going on with him. Like, I feel like that's probably a nerve that people are going to try to hit and see if they can have success.
Dude, with all the moves, so like they draft Ulofoshio, who I was thinking like, okay, special teams linebacker, maybe some upside because he's athletic, but special teams guy, they love taking linebackers on day 3, cool. But they signed Nicholas Morrow, they draft Ulofoshio, they bring in Deion Jones, and then even on the roster, they still have Balin Spector and they still have Dorian Williams. Like they have all these linebackers. They've got like 55 linebackers right now. And yeah, like that's been just creeping in the back of my mind of like, granted, this is a good answer. We have no weaknesses, Mr. Patriot. That's very good. I just wonder because he broke his leg, Milano. Like it was a nasty leg break, and I am also sure I think he also tore his ACL and his MCL because of how bad the break was.
That's like the Gronk injury.
It was a lot. I'm actually going to look it up right now as I'm talking to you. But that
does sound a lot like what happened to Gronk in 2013 when TJ Ward hit him low and he flipped and like got torn ACL, torn MCL. I think he broke his leg and he got a concussion.
It's brutal. Where is it? Oh yeah, he suffered a right tibial plateau fracture. Anytime you break your tibia, like that's insane. I'm trying to find the specifics. I thought he tore more things. I'll find it at some point. But yeah, I think that's a really sneaky thing. And it's funny that you say that because it's been in the back of my mind. I'm like, they keep bringing in all these linebackers. And my thought is, okay, maybe it's just camp bodies and depth. But they've like jumped the shark of like camp bodies and depth at this point. Like they keep bringing in like more and more.
I think they're trying to tell us something. But yeah, like, again, I like Ed Oliver. He doesn't scare me. And if Daquan Jones isn't a guy who you think is going to be available consistently, then it's like, all right, iffy linebacking core, inconsistent middle of your defense in terms of the trenches, and then your safety situation. It's like you got good players, but it's like, where do these guys fit? How's that going to work out? So early on, I would not be surprised if teams like try to see how much they can get away with over the middle. Then offensively,
real quick. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah. I found it. So Milano said he sustained a fractured right tibia, which is the bone that runs down the front of the leg just below the knee, but there was no damage to any knee ligaments. So it was purely just bone breaks. So I'm imagining that incorrectly. So, okay, cool. I feel better. I'm sorry. Continue.
You're good. And then, so yeah, the middle of the defense and then just like the receiving core still doesn't really scare me. I just got to see it.
Okay.
That's really the thing for me because I like Keon Coleman, but he just doesn't move the needle so much. And I'm like, because if it was Leggett, or A.D. Mitchell, those are guys where it's like, if you make a mistake, they're gone.
It hurt you.
And like, yeah, they can turn, a slant where they got a step into see you later, I'm gone. I know A.D. Mitchell's not really a yak guy, but even downfield, we're talking like the double moves he has. If you hit him in stride, like he can just run away from coverage. So if it were one of those guys, I'd feel much differently and be like, all right, there's your alpha. Everybody else can kind of play off him. I still like Keon. I just want to see how they use him, how well he syncs up with Josh. And then it's like, all right, how well does he complement Kincaid and how does this all work together? Because I still love James Cook. I really do think that run game, especially with Ray Davis, is kind of thunder and lightning.
Yeah, that's cool.
Zach Moss, where it's like, okay, I see what you're doing here. This is pretty exciting. But yeah, the pass catchers just don't really do much for me. Like you're always worried about Josh Allen, and he can make everybody else look better. But I mean, if it's like a man coverage down and the Patriots have, their best guys out there, I'm not, I'm assuming that they're probably going to get a stop unless Josh pulls some out of his butt.
Let me flip that question and kind of ask you something similar. What on this Bills team, aside from Josh Allen, if you're looking at this team, what worries you or makes you fearful?
James Cook by a mile.
James Cook himself or the like him overall, or like the run game with him in it?
Both, but really, like, he's so dynamic. One of the worst tackling games the Patriots had all season. Like, they were a very good they always are, but they were like statistically one of the best tackling teams.
The first Bills Patriots game last year, right?
Yeah.
We talked about it going into it. They were like a record pace for like missed tackles and broken tackles. Like, they weren't giving up ground for anything, and Cook was there left and right, slipping dudes like everywhere.
So annoying. Like, that was when Jalen Mills had a bad one. Adrian Phillips had a bad one. Kyle Duggar was like standing up straight and tried to tackle him. And I was just like, Kyle, this is like, I love you, but this is the stuff that drives me up a freaking wall. Like, don't tackle people standing straight up. I don't know. But yeah, when they played last year, I was like, I don't want James Cook to just so good at ripping off those long runs. And it really is like, if one guy misses him, he's getting a lot of yards, and you don't want him in the open field. So there's no one else really on the roster who makes me feel that way. Like, I think Keon, I just need to see him as a pro. Like, if the Patriots had drafted him, I would have been at the front of the bus for the fan club because we talked about it. I do like him, but I also just want to see how he gets utilized and if teams are going to use him to his strengths. But yeah, no one else on this team really scares me. And this
offensively and defensively.
Yeah, and this is the conversation we had where I said, if you take Josh Allen off this team, who's scared of the Bills? No one. Be honest. They're not very scary. I'm just being like, the offensive line looks way more average, I think. I think they have good players, especially run blocking. But I think, like, without a guy like Josh Allen who can create, who can, I don't want to put it all on him because he gets himself into trouble as well.
Yeah, he does.
I feel like this roster looks a lot more like, okay, like I wouldn't really notice on a calendar if it weren't for Josh Allen. I don't like saying that because I do respect Bills Mafia. You know that. I actually like you guys, but that's just what I see.
I'm going to take you when you come here for Bills Patriots. I'm going to take you out to dinner and get you jumped for all the horrible things you just said. Looking at this team going into 2024 versus what they were last year, how much, as we currently sit right now, coming out of the draft, and maybe they'll make some more roster moves going forward.
Real quick, I'm going to be a distraction.
Don't show that picture. I knew you were going to show that picture again.
I am one of you, kind of in spirit.
Don't let him fool you. He's not at the Bills store. That's a fake Bills store. He photoshopped that. No,
I got all the receipts, buddy. I got all of them.
I knew when I saw you grabbing your phone, I was like, he's going to grab that picture of him in front of the Bills store. I knew. That's fair. That's fair. I like it. Pull the receipts.
I love Bills Mafia. You guys are a very good time. People tried to give me crap, and I was like, hey, I come in peace. I just want to watch a good game. And you guys had me deaf before the first half was over. So
that's
a lot of respect. Sorry.
No, you're good. What was I saying? I forgot. Oh, how much of it, like, looking at this team right now with what they look to be right now going into 2024 on paper, schematically, whole roster, whatever you're looking at, thinking about, versus what they were at this time last year. Forget about what they actually were in 2023. No, actually, I guess factor that in as well. How much of a drop off do you think, like, from the outside perspective, like, that you've seen, like, for this team? Like, as a person who is an enemy, an opponent, covers a team that matters against the Buffalo Bills because they play in the AFC East. You've already talked about it and alluded to it a couple episodes ago, and then here again, like, of what this team looks like without Josh Allen. How much of a drop off do you think that there's been for this 2024 roster right now as it stands versus what it looked like and what it was in 2023?
It reminds me of Mahomes last year, but he doesn't have a Travis Kelce. Where it's like, all right, when worst comes to worst, you at least have Kelce, and other guys might let you down, but they'll make it work. I don't want to say that the Bills receiving core is that inconsistent. I think they have good pros in Curtis Samuel. And I keep saying Matt Collins. I feel like he doesn't come up. I'm just a really big fan of his. But I like it. I love it.
I love you championing Matt Collins. I'm
he's
a huge
fun,
fan
and he's an interesting guy.
He's your Bills Tyquan Thornton.
Yeah, I think he is. I keep factoring him into these sets, and then I feel like people are like, he's not going to play. I forgot Chase Claypool.
Don't do that. We're not doing that. We're not talking about Chase Claypool here. We're not doing it. Don't do it.
But anyway, I think that we would need Josh Allen to have that type of season where Mahomes was like, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to win. I need to take a step back and just do the stuff that's easy whenever defenses let me. And then every once in a while, when they slip up, I will stick a dagger in their throat. I don't know if Josh can do that. Not consistently. I know he has the capability because he always does against the Pats, where other than last year, he always just like flips a switch and he's like, oh, I'm playing the best defensive coordinator in history. And he's throwing literally everything he can at me. Let me just take every check down because everybody's, dropping back 15, 20 yards. I've seen him do it. I haven't seen him do it for like a month straight or 2 months straight. Or it's just like, wow, Josh is just going to take all the easy stuff. It happens sporadically, but I don't think this is the kind of offense where him playing the hero ball stuff is going to work. I don't think they have enough dogs like that. I think Keon can be that guy. I think or Dalton Kincaid can be that guy. But again, like they're not guys where they terrify me, where I'm like, Dalton Kincaid, that dude could put up 150. Like if you don't pay, I just don't think he's that necessarily dangerous. And Keon not having that like extra gear to really take the top off, or like in space, he'll get a chunk play, but he's not really getting a home run. Even with Javon Baker, that's my one reason that I don't think he's quite wide receiver 1 upside. Only reason I really have him there and not just as like elite wide receiver 2 is I think he's got a crazy mentality. Bro, real quick, I'm going off tangent a little bit. He was talking to Steve Smith during that like whole breakdown of the receivers thing. And have you seen the Kobe documentary where he talks about how he would go to tournaments as a kid and use his left hand? Because he was like, I wanted to get better on the biggest stage.
Oh, no, that's cool.
Comfortable with. And Javon Baker goes, I think he was talking about Pat Surtain and when they were in practice together at Bama. And he goes, I don't want to attack what you're weak at. Like, I already know what you're bad at. I want to see what you're good at and how I stack up. It's like, who even talks like that? Who is going out on a football field and being like, I'm going to attack your strength when you are Pat Surtain? Like, that's different. And that's the only reason I put him above Keon, where I think athletically, like they're different profiles. I think Baker's more like a bit more of a dynamic mover and more of a separator.
Yeah, much more technical than
Coleman but they're not like burners or anything. But I just think, while I do think Keon has that dog in him too, I think Javon is just like a completely different breed.
Dude, that's
why it's not quite there for me.
To add on to that, I don't know if I said it the last time you were here. When we were at the Senior Bowl, like his release packages were like his release work was so good at the Senior Bowl. And so after the first practice, I went up and asked him, I was like, hey, like, let's talk about your releases and like how you're winning here so far. And his response, I'm like, I'm kind of getting it verbatim, but paraphrasing it. He was like, I already know what everyone's finna to do, so I'm just gonna go out and beat him, and that's it. And I was like, oh, all right. And then Eric grabs him. And like, I forget I think Eric asked him like, what's his mentality or like what he tries to do at a separate, some kind of question. And Baker's response was, I just go out there and kill the defensive back. Like
he said that in his opening press conference. It got taken out of the transcript and they deleted it from the video. He said, my mentality is to go out and kill whoever's across from me. And I was just like, well, I'm not going to let my fingers leave the keyboard because this dude is going to say some crazy shit.
And it was like the answer he gave me and the answer he gave Eric is it wasn't like it wasn't obnoxious or like narcissistic or arrogant. Like he wasn't saying it like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and like he was. And this is what got me. It was just so matter of fact. It was just like, I already know what they're finna do, so I'm just going to go beat them. Oh yeah, I'm going to kill the DB. It wasn't like
Twitter bio. You seen his Twitter bio?
I
hate DBs.
Yes, I looked it up during the Senior Bowl. The two Twitter profiles I remember from the Senior Bowl are Baker's, which says I hate DBs, and then Malachi Corley's literally has like the Yak King or Yak God like in the bio. And I was like, I think with a crown, I think it's Yak King, and then he's got the crown with it.
Are you scared of him in the division? Are you scared of Malachi Corley?
No, I think he's fun.
I think he's a little overhyped.
He doesn't win contested catches. He's got some technical stuff that is fun. Like he showed more at the Senior Bowl than I thought he was going to, but everything he does on tape is bubble screens.
It's like a running back, but like a big running back.
It's fun though. Like he is though. He is a running back with the ball in his hands and it's awesome, but everything he does is bubble screens, drags, tunnel screens, smoke screens. Like, so that can be fun. I think he has room to grow and he needs to, but I like some of the things that he does. I just don't see, I don't really gravitate towards dudes that don't have a lot of refinement or technicality in his game, but I mean, he's so fun as an auxiliary piece. And he's just a dude that you have to scheme touches for. Like which is funny because you have Garrett Wilson there who it can just go get you a bucket at like any time. Whereas Quarterly, you have to like scheme stuff open for him, which is interesting. Yeah, man, I hate that Baker went to the Pats. I just loved him so much. Like his mentality is just so, and I know it turned out like some people like kind of turned or rubbed the wrong way by it, but it just like wasn't, it's just so awesome to see a dude talk like that and be like that. And it's not for show. It's not out of arrogance this is just like how he approaches the game. Like, yo, I'm going out there to kill you. Like, that's it. And he's not saying it for show or attention. And I was like, oh, that type of mentality. And he's serious. Yes. And he blocks his butt off. Like he puts dudes in the dirt. Like he's nasty on it. And even too, like you watch him too. One of my favorite clips. Oh, what is it? They're in the low red zone. It's last year. And the defense is in man coverage, but he doesn't go out to block. He's in the slot. He doesn't go out to block the safety. He goes out and like you see, like they run routes a little bit to try and occupy him. And he goes out and he runs a real route and shakes the safety, and the safety falls down. And then he turns around and points at her like, yo, bro, I got you. You fell down. Yeah. And I just thought one, to let them do, no, yo, I cooked you. I just like that. But then two,
Keon does that too. Keon does the exact same thing.
I got some clips where he pushes dudes to the ground and then he points to him and let him know that he got him. But like the fact that he just ran a real route to occupy the man, I just thought that was like cool. And just like how he approaches the game, just the tenacity, like, I hate using like, oh, he's a dog, because like that gets talked about so much now for someone, but he literally is the epitome of that phrasing. Like, and it's just awesome to see how he plays the game. And he was one of my favorite players in this draft, like pre-Senior Bowl. And then I saw him at the Senior Bowl and loved him. And I was like, of course he went to the Patriots. It reminded me of my favorite player a couple years ago in the whole draft was Trent McDuffie. And I was fighting with so many people in the Bills content community and fans, because everybody was like, his arms are too short. He'll never succeed. I liked him and Roger McCreary. Both of them had short arms. And Roger McCreary went and has been the starting nickel for Tennessee, even though he never played nickel ever at Auburn and has been functioning well for them. But I loved McDuffie so much. And then the Chiefs traded up for him, and it just like ripped my heart out. I was like, I can't even, like, he went to a team like I can't even root for. Like last year I felt better. I loved Kalijah Cansey and I loved Kobe Turner. Cansey went to the Bucks, Turner went to the Rams. I was like, oh, cool. Like, two teams I don't hate.
Yep, exactly.
I can watch him play football. Sweet. And when Baker went to the Pats, I was just like, man, like, this sucks. Like, it's just, yeah, the way he approaches the game is so cool. And kind of just to see that. And man, it'll be funny too, to kind of see with the Pats getting May and Polk and Baker, and then the Bills, I guess, throwing like Coleman into that mix from, the Pats have an opportunity with their young core to kind of turn some things around. And I think,
don't forget about Pop, not rookie, obviously, but
yeah.
Talking about the young core.
Oh, absolutely. And it'll be funny too. You mentioned at the beginning, I guess I never really thought of it. Like, we'll probably tie in, especially because Coleman went first, like Baker and Polk and Coleman. I could see that being 2 years from now of Bills fans being like, oh, should have just taken Jalen Polk. Like, look how he's killing it. Oh, should have taken Baker in the second. Instead, the Pats got him in the fourth, and he's crushing it. Like, how all those things get woven together and combined, like, for years as we do this dance forever.
One other thing about Baker I want to point out is because people get rubbed the wrong way by his attitude and what he says, I was putting out stuff about like that showed his on-field character. Because there are so many times where you'll see like guys just don't do, oh, awesome. Where guys kind of phone it in, and sometimes you can't really blame them. Like we talked about that with AD Mitchell, where sometimes it's like, all right, if the play's away from you, not the worst thing in the world if you're not running full speed. There was one game where like 3 times this dude is sprinting downfield to catch up with a teammate or to throw a block. There was 3 times in one game, and he does that consistently where you see like he'll be downfield because he ran his ISO route, then sees somebody's coming, and he'll throw a block. He doesn't always sustain it necessarily. I think he'd get better there. But when you just see, like, you don't see tape where it's like, yeah, this guy's all about him, but he's not really like, no, he loves football and he is going to do whatever he needs to on the field to make sure he contributes and stays on the field. Like my thing is, dude, I think he's going to play more than Jalen Polk, even though he got drafted later. Because one, he's an X. They need an X. Yeah. I don't see how you put Javon Baker, knowing him the way we do, how is he going to be on the bench? I think he will lose his GD mind if he is on the bench for like multiple weeks. I don't think he would allow himself to.
No, I was going to say, like, I don't think he'll, like, not from like he's going to throw a fit and freak out. Like, he won't lose. Yeah, he won't lose to the point that he's going to end up being on the bench. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, and I saw, what clip did I see? Oh, I forget who it was. It was a clip from Alabama from a couple years ago, and it was one of their receivers just talking about the receiver grouping, and they were loaded at receiver at the time, and the guy was just like, no, like Baker, and we kept talking about Javon Baker, and I was just like, oh, like that's pretty cool. And
he learned from like Waddle and who else was there at the time? Devontae
Smith. Yep, I was gonna say Devontae Smith. Yeah, like they just, and it wasn't. I forget who was talking because it wasn't either of them, and. Like his track record, man. Yeah, I'm annoyed that he went to the Pats. And then they got Drake May, like so stupid.
How do you feel about Jaheim Bell? Now we're making it a Pats show.
I liked him more on tape than I did at the Senior
Really?
Bowl.
I liked the Senior Bowl clips more than I liked his tape.
I liked him
downfield more. And I was like, oh, so we can do this.
They used him downfield in Florida State.
I felt like not a ton. Maybe it was just the games I saw. I felt like it was like 3 or 4 where he's adjusting, and I'm like, he can do this. Why are you?
So that's what it was. It was only like 1 or 2 a game tops, but the movement and his adjustments downfield, I thought were cool. And then you factor in like his physicality and what he can do. Like I thought he was an underrated piece. I mean, he balled out in that opening game against LSU. Like he had so many good moments. I thought he was a sneaky fun part. Like the majority of the year was Travis, and then Coleman and Wilson were the talk, and then Benson started to emerge, but I thought Bell was a sneaky one. And I thought he was fine at the Senior Bowl. I liked him more on tape because of his athleticism and the downfield stuff. But, screw the Patriots, whatever. Anything else on your mind before we go? If you don't have anything, that's fine. The floor is yours. So any parting thoughts, any analysis pieces? If not, you can tell everybody who you are and what you do and all that stuff. The floor is yours for anything and everything.
I will say I'm hoping, and I think we will get some more competitive AFC East games involving the Patriots.
Real quick, actually, before you do that, let me ask you one question. Who wins the AFC East in 2024?
Dolphins.
Oh, you almost threw up.
A healthy Jets team. Honestly, this isn't like the AFC beast that it was last year. I feel like there's a lot of exposed cracks. Like even with the Dolphins having OBJ, they have Patrick Paul, which makes me feel better about their tackle situation a little bit. I just don't think Tua is that guy until I'm proven. I like him. I don't think he's that guy.
You got to put money. You got to put your life savings down right now on somebody to win the AFC East. You got to put it down. Can the Jets? Because if it's the Jets, cool. Can they stay healthy? Is it Tua? Is it the Bills?
I'm going to say Bills because of Josh Allen. Like literally, that's the default. Because I don't think the Jets are going to stay healthy. I don't think the Pats are there yet. I think they're going to be better than people think. The Patriots. I think they might sneakily be one of the more explosive teams in the league, just because of how the scheme works and what their quarterbacks are. Like this isn't Zappy and Mac Jones. We're talking about Jacoby, who's still got a cannon. Like dude can still throw downfield, and Drake May. And then I just don't think Tua is that guy. I hope he proves me wrong. I really like him as a person. I'm rooting for him. But I would have to put it on Josh Allen's shoulder.
The Jets I'm going to say the same thing for this year that I said last year. And again, it's something in the water over there. But if the Jets are healthy, and I know every year, I guess they kind of put themselves in it because they can't stay healthy. But I feel like if so many people are just in the mindset of like laugh out loud Jets, like whatever, and write them off. Man, if they're healthy, they're such a problem. If they stay healthy, they're such a problem.
Like, dude, last year people were singing their praises. They're better this year than they were last year. If you're talking about how they're entering the season, and I was saying when Tyron Smith signed, I was like, oh, he went to a competitor. People were like, or a contender. Everyone was like, oh, it's just the Jets. I'm like, what are you talking about? What were you saying this time last year? Everyone's freaking, the Jets. They crowned them already. They're going to the Super Bowl. And now they get better players, 2 offensive linemen from one of the best offensive lines in the league, and we're going to pretend that they're just bad? Acknowledge the health, for sure. But it's so ridiculous to me to act like they're this like know-nothing team when their defense is banger and they still have Aaron Rodgers. Like if he's a pocket quarterback. It's not like he's running around or anything. Like as long as they don't get him killed in the first game of the season, I think they'll be fine.
Like last year.
It's so stupid how people just default. No offense to anybody who thinks this. It just grinds my gears because everybody was just loving the Jets. And now, they have the injuries and they got a little bit of reality and it's the complete other end of the spectrum. I just don't get that.
No, and I'm in a similar boat. Like, I think their defense is still so real, and all you just need is halfway decent offense. And even if Mike Williams falls apart, their offensive line should be significantly better. And then you got Brees and you got Garrett Wilson. We'll see what Aaron Rodgers looks like coming back. And it's still like, and then even the defense, like they lost Huff and just replaced him like with Hassan Reddick.
Yeah.
And then
now Tyron Smith and Olu, which is nuts. Like,
I forgot they got. As you were talking here, I was like, who did they take in the first round? Because I remember they traded back. I couldn't remember. I forgot they took Olu. Yeah, like just, and if, again, he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but like if Elijah Vera Tucker stays healthy, he's really good. And then what's his face who they took from Wisconsin last year, who's their starting center?
Schmitz?
No, friggin' I can't believe I can't remember. I liked him so much last year. Joe Tippmann. Thank you. Off the top of my head. Huge man, huge monster of a man, especially for center. But yeah, man, if they can stay healthy. Sorry. So, okay. So your prediction.
Mike Williams, Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley. That's a pretty solid receiving core.
And see, that's what's fun about Corley. Like, Mike Williams is probably going to get banged up. I'm not even saying that to make a joke. He just can't stay healthy. But like, Williams could be a 2 if he can stay healthy. But even if you just get 10 games out of Mike Williams, that's a win. And Williams plus Wilson, and then you can just scheme some stuff up for Malachi Corley, and you still have Brees Hall with that line and with Rodgers. Like, I think they could be a somebody. But I like a prediction. I like your thoughts. I interrupted you, though. Floor is yours. Whatever you want. If you want to close this episode out, tell everybody about you, speak on war and peace, whatever you want. Floor is yours.
Less war, more peace.
Nice.
But no, I love this audience. You guys are the best, as always. Thank you so much for welcoming me in to your humble abode. Always a pleasure. And buddy, love talking to you always. I might have to do what I did last time and steal this idea again for next week. We'll be in touch though. But
you're more than welcome.
Yeah, I like Andy Swift. Active with good comments. You're awesome, Andy. But yeah, everybody, you're awesome as always. It's been a blast. So thank you for having me, pal.
You're getting you've been getting a lot of kind comments and words throughout the chat from people. I'm pulling up some of them now. Before I send you go,
you know why?
Because the picture. Are you going to pull up the picture again?
One of you. Because I'm one of you.
Don't let him fool you. He's a liar and a charlatan.
One of the boys in a Brady jersey, and I didn't get physically assaulted.
That'll change next time you're here. No, I'm just kidding. And actually, before you send it on your way, my head is killing me, and we've been running late. So I'm going to throw up the Toodles folks banner, and I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody rather than let Taylor go now. I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone. I want to thank everybody for joining us live here on this, who rode live with us. If you have not already, please, and thank you. Drop a like on this video. It goes a sincerely long way towards helping myself and the entire team to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. So please drop a like on this video on your way out. If you are watching post live, please drop a like on this video here on YouTube. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, that's cool as well. Please rate and review and subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever have you. And regardless, whether you're watching, listening, tell your family and friends and loved ones about this show, about how awesome it is. Word of mouth is always tremendously appreciated. If you thought this show was terrible, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day by making them watch this show. Subscribe to the Cover One YouTube channel. Turn on notifications for the Disguised Coverage playlist. Major thank you to everyone who tuned in live for this episode. Major thank you to anyone and everyone who listened, viewed, download, likes, rates, subscribes, word of mouth, kind words, and coming to the chat or out in the universe and the ethos and the ether. Appreciate you folks for that. Thank you very much to Mr. Taylor Kyles for joining me on this episode. A bit of housekeeping. Eric is going on vacation, so no film room tomorrow night. We're dropping a video from some stuff that we did, so that'll be going up in place of our live episode tomorrow. I'll also be doing a film breakdown of Javon Solomon that'll be added to the channel coming up through this week, so that'll be on the lookout for you folks as well. But yeah, until next time, thank you very much to everyone who watched live or watched later, listen, download, whatever have you. Thank you very much to Taylor Kyles. Go get yourself some One Pie Pizza, the best pizza in Buffalo, New York. Sweet sauce pie, cup of char pepperoni, great cheese to sauce ratio, homemade blue cheese, all the initiatives they do for the community and partnering with Roswell and the SPCA and the Alzheimer's Foundation and Toys for Tots, all that stuff. I hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. I will see you next Tuesday live, 9 p.m. Eastern for another episode of Disguised Coverage. And until then, Godspeed. And as always, go Bills.